My coworkers sabotaged my promotion by lying to our boss about my attitude problem. This week, karma made sure they all got to meet the new manager, me. For 3 years, I'd been the invisible backbone of our department. While Veronica spent hours perfecting her nail art at her desk, I reorganized our entire filing system. While Dennis took 3-hour liquid lunches, I stayed late debugging code. And while Priya gossiped by the coffee machine about everyone's personal lives, I landed our biggest client. They thought I didn't notice when they started their whisper campaign. It began subtly. Veronica would stop talking when I entered the break room. Dennis started CCing our boss on emails questioning my decisions. Priya began documenting my arrival times, conveniently ignoring that I worked through lunch daily while she took 2-hour shopping breaks. The promotion to department manager was supposed to be mine. My metrics were flawless. Customer satisfaction, 98%. Project completion rate, 100%. But numbers don't matter when 3 people coordinate their lies. During my review, our boss Miranda looked uncomfortable. "Your work is exceptional," she said, avoiding eye contact. "But multiple team members have raised concerns about your collaborative spirit." I knew exactly who those team members were. They say you're difficult to work with, dismissive, even hostile. Every word was a knife. I'd covered for these people countless times. When Veronica missed deadlines because of her hangovers, I'd quietly finished her reports. When Dennis lost a major account through incompetence, I'd worked weekends to win it back. When Priya accidentally deleted our client database, I'd spent 72 straight hours recovering it. The promotion went to Veronica. She celebrated with a department lunch I wasn't invited to. From my desk, I watched them toast with champagne Dennis had expensed as client entertainment. That afternoon, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of Veronica's social media posts during work hours. Security footage of Dennis stumbling back from lunch. Priya's actual timesheet versus her reported hours. Their personal shopping delivered to the office. The dating app notifications constantly pinging Dennis's screen during presentations. But my masterpiece was the email archive. 3 months of messages between them, planning my downfall, deciding what lies to tell. Veronica writing, "If we all say the same thing, Miranda has to believe us." Dennis responding, "She's too competent, makes us look bad." Priya adding, "Once I'm assistant manager, I'll make sure she quits." They'd forgotten our emails auto backup to the cloud, and that I'd set up that system. 2 weeks into Veronica's management disaster, corporate arrived for a surprise audit. Our department's performance had plummeted 47% in 14 days. Clients were demanding explanations. Projects were hemorrhaging money. The auditor pulled me aside. "You're Josephine?" she asked, reviewing her tablet. I nodded. "Your name is on every successful project for the past 3 years. But you weren't promoted?" "Personality conflicts," I said simply. She frowned and scheduled individual interviews with the entire team. Veronica crumbled immediately, admitting she'd been overwhelmed and had no idea how I'd managed everything. Dennis, still buzzed from lunch, slurred through his excuses. Priya tried to blame me for not helping during the transition, until the auditor showed her the emails I'd sent offering assistance. All ignored. That night, Miranda was terminated for gross negligence in personnel management. The next morning, corporate called me directly. "We need someone to salvage this department immediately. The position is yours if you want it." "I'll need full autonomy over personnel decisions," I said. Granted. I spent the weekend preparing, new policies typed, termination paperwork drafted, security badges deactivated. Monday morning, I arrived early and placed 3 boxes on 3 desks. Veronica walked in first, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, then horror. "Morning," I said pleasantly. "There's been a restructuring." And Dennis appeared next, saw me at Miranda's former desk, and actually stumbled backward. Priya was last, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I stood, smoothing my new blazer. "As your new department head, I'll need to evaluate all positions for redundancy. But first," I smiled, checking my watch. "HR needs to see you 3 immediately. Something about falsifying timesheet records and misuse of company resources." Priya's face went white. "You reported us?" "I didn't have to," I replied. "Your own emails and security footage spoke volumes." Corporate was particularly interested in that champagne lunch. As security escorted them out, boxes in hand, I pulled up our client list. Time to rebuild what they'd destroyed. But the silence felt wrong, too complete. I walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot. My 3 former coworkers stood by Veronica's car, but they weren't leaving. They were on their phones, gesturing wildly, looking back up at my window. Then I saw him, walking across the parking lot in an expensive suit I recognized. My ex-husband, the corporate lawyer, the one who'd tried to destroy me once before. 5 years of marriage to Bradley had taught me exactly how his mind worked. He approached every situation like a chess game, always thinking 3 moves ahead. Seeing him stride confidently toward my former coworkers, briefcase in hand, made my stomach clench with familiar dread. I'd been 23 when we met at a corporate networking event, fresh out of college, overwhelmed by the sea of power suits and practiced handshakes. Bradley had rescued me from an awkward conversation with his charming smile and seemingly genuine interest in my ideas. He was 31, already a senior associate at Kellerman & Associates, and I was flattered that someone so accomplished wanted to spend time with me. Our courtship felt like a fairy tale. Expensive dinners, weekend trips to wine country, tickets to shows I could never afford. He introduced me to his colleagues as brilliant and going places. When he proposed after 18 months, I thought I'd won the lottery. The cracks didn't show until after the wedding. It started with small corrections. You might want to rephrase that in your presentation. Maybe choose a different outfit for the client dinner. I'm just trying to help you succeed, sweetheart. By year 2, he was editing my emails before I sent them, scheduling my networking events, and steering my career decisions. When I got the job at Morrison Tech, the company I now managed, he'd insisted on reviewing my contract first. "These corporations will take advantage of someone inexperienced," he'd said, marking up the agreement with his red pen. "Good thing you have me to protect you." I'd been grateful then, naive enough to mistake control for care. The divorce had been nuclear warfare. Bradley knew every weakness in my financial situation because he'd managed our money. He knew my insecurities because I'd shared them during intimate moments. He knew my professional relationships because he'd cultivated them alongside me. When I finally found the courage to leave, he'd tried to destroy everything I'd built. He'd called my boss, suggesting I was emotionally unstable and going through a difficult time. He'd contacted clients, hinting that my personal problems might affect my work quality. He'd even reached out to my colleagues, expressing concern about my mental state. The divorce settlement had favored him heavily. As a lawyer, he'd known how to present the case to make me look unreasonable. I'd walked away with almost nothing except my job, which he'd nearly cost me too. Now, watching him shake hands with Veronica outside, I realized he'd found new pieces to move on his board. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. There's a lot you don't know about your situation. Bradley." I stared at the screen. The arrogance was breathtaking. After everything he'd put me through, he thought he could just summon me for a conversation. Another message. "I'm representing your former colleagues. They have grounds for wrongful termination. We should discuss this civilly before things get complicated." The audacity made me laugh out loud. Bradley had always believed he was the smartest person in any room. He'd underestimated me during the divorce, and he was underestimating me now. I opened my laptop and began typing. "Mr. Kellerman, any communication regarding personnel matters should be directed to our corporate legal department. I'm forwarding your contact information to them now. Best regards, Josephine Chen, Department Manager." I hit send, then immediately called our general counsel. "Amelia, it's Josephine. I need to brief you on a potential legal situation." While I explained the circumstances to Amelia, I watched Bradley's group through the window. Veronica was gesticulating wildly, probably recounting her version of events. Dennis kept nodding and pointing at our building. Priya stood apart, arms crossed, looking skeptical. Smart girl, Priya. She knew they'd screwed up. Amelia listened without interrupting, then asked, "Do you have documentation of their misconduct?" 17 gigabytes worth, I said. Email archives, security footage, timesheet discrepancies, expense report fraud, and recorded conversations. Recorded conversations? Miranda held performance reviews in her office. She always recorded them for her notes. I have access to the system. There was a pause. "Josephine, that's comprehensive. I learned from the best," I said, thinking of Bradley's meticulous approach to gathering evidence. Sometimes being married to a lawyer teaches you things. Your ex-husband is representing them? Apparently. That creates an interesting conflict of interest. He has intimate knowledge of your personal and professional background from your marriage. Any competent judge would consider that problematic. Relief flooded through me. So they don't have a case? Not based on what you've told me. Wrongful termination requires proof that they were fired for illegal reasons. Discrimination, retaliation for whistleblowing, that sort of thing. Poor performance and misconduct are perfectly valid grounds for termination. What should I expect? Posturing, mostly. They'll probably demand reinstatement, back pay, and damages for emotional distress. We'll respond with our evidence and counter with our own claims for the losses their misconduct caused the company. After I hung up, I felt calmer. Bradley was playing his usual intimidation game, but this time I had the stronger position. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. "Josephine." Bradley's voice was as smooth as ever. "I was hoping we could handle this professionally. We are handling it professionally, through proper legal channels. There's no need for lawyers to get involved. We're both reasonable people." The irony wasn't lost on me. "You're a lawyer, Bradley. You're literally involved. You know what I mean. We could resolve this quietly. Your former colleagues are willing to waive their rights to pursue damages if you provide positive references and agree not to contest their unemployment claims." "That's generous of them," I said dryly, "considering they committed fraud and conspired to damage my career. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" I smiled. 17 gigabytes of it. The line went quiet. Bradley was recalculating. "Perhaps we should meet in person," he said finally. "Neutral ground. There are things about this situation you might not understand, such as Veronica's promotion wasn't just about performance metrics. There were other factors. Political considerations. Relationships with key stakeholders." My blood chilled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that sometimes the best candidate doesn't get the job for reasons that have nothing to do with qualifications. And sometimes when those reasons come to light, they create liability for the company." He was fishing, trying to make me think there was some hidden corruption in my situation. Classic Bradley. When you don't have facts, create doubt. "If you have evidence of wrongdoing, present it to the appropriate authorities," I said. "Otherwise, this conversation is over." "Josephine, wait." I hung up, but his words had planted a seed of uncertainty. What if there was something I didn't know? What if Miranda's promotion decision had been influenced by factors beyond the lies my coworkers told? I pulled up Miranda's personnel file and began reading. Her hiring date, performance reviews, salary history. Nothing unusual jumped out. Then I checked her expense reports for the months leading up to my review. 3 dinners with Harrison Caldwell, Morrison Tech's VP of Business Development. 2 lunches with his assistant. A weekend conference in Napa that Caldwell had also attended. Harrison Caldwell? The man who'd interviewed me when I was first hired, who'd praised my work on the Branson account, who'd been noticeably absent from the office the week of my promotion review. I pulled his travel records. He'd been in Chicago that week, supposedly meeting with potential clients, but his expense reports showed dinners for one, and charges at a hotel spa. My desk phone rang. Internal call. "Josephine, it's Amelia. Can you come to my office? We need to discuss your situation." The general counsel's office was on the top floor, with windows overlooking the city. Amelia Torres was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd been with Morrison Tech for over a decade. She gestured for me to sit across from her polished conference table. "I've been reviewing the terminations you authorized," she said, spreading out files. "Everything appears to be in order, but I want to understand the timeline better." She pulled out a calendar and began marking dates. "The promotion decision was made here. The audit happened here. The terminations here. That's a very compressed timeline. Corporate moved quickly once they saw the numbers," I said. "Yes, but I'm wondering why the audit was ordered in the first place. Performance issues don't typically trigger immediate corporate intervention unless there's something else going on." I shifted in my chair. "What do you mean?" "I made some calls this morning. The audit wasn't random. Someone specifically requested it. Someone with influence." "Who?" Amelia hesitated. "Harrison Caldwell." The pieces started clicking into place. He was involved in my promotion review. More than involved. He was the deciding vote. And according to his expense reports, he was having regular contact with Miranda in the months before your review. You think they were having an affair? I think that's a possibility we need to consider. If personal relationships influenced professional decisions, that creates significant liability for the company. I thought about Bradley's implications, about political considerations and relationships with key stakeholders. What does this mean for my position? Nothing changes regarding the terminations. Your former colleague still violated company policy, but if there was corruption in the promotion process, that's a separate issue. An issue that could affect me how? Amelia's expression was carefully neutral. If the original promotion decision was tainted, corporate might decide to reevaluate the entire situation. My heart sank. After everything I'd been through, they might take away the job I'd fought so hard to earn. However, Amelia continued, any reevaluation would have to consider your actual performance and qualifications. Based on the audit results, you're clearly the right person for the role. But it creates doubt. It creates questions, which is probably exactly what your ex-husband intended when he took this case. I stared out the window at the parking lot. Bradley's car was gone, but I could still feel his presence like a shadow. What do you recommend? We conduct our own internal investigation. Full transparency. If there was misconduct, we address it head-on rather than letting it become leverage in a wrongful termination suit. And if we find something, then we deal with the consequences. But we do it on our terms, not theirs. I nodded, though my stomach was churning. Bradley had found a way to turn my victory into a potential disaster, just like always. There's one more thing, Amelia said. I looked into your ex-husband's firm. Kellerman and Associates specializes in employment law, but they're also known for taking high-profile cases that generate publicity. This isn't just about your former colleagues. This is about building a reputation, at my expense. Potentially, but that also means he might be overreaching. Lawyers who chase headlines sometimes get careless with facts. When I returned to my office, I found a manila envelope on my desk. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, Miranda and Harrison Caldwell in what appeared to be a hotel room, embracing. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days before my promotion review. My hands trembled as I stared at the image. Someone had been watching. Someone had documented their affair. And now someone was making sure I knew about it. My phone rang. Bradley again. Did you receive my package? He asked. I don't know what you're talking about. The photograph. Interesting, isn't it? The timestamp is particularly revealing. Where did you get this? Does it matter? What matters is what it represents. A pattern of decision-making based on personal relationships rather than merit. I closed my eyes. What do you want, Bradley? A conversation, face-to-face, 1 hour, you choose the location. So you can ambush me with more photographs, more implications, so I can tell you the truth about what happened. Because believe it or not, Josephine, we might be on the same side here. That was the last thing I expected him to say. Explain. Not over the phone. Meet me at the Blue Door. You know where we had our first date? Neutral ground, public place. Bring your lawyer if it makes you feel better. The Blue Door. A coffee shop downtown where we'd spent hours talking about our dreams, back when I thought Bradley cared about mine as much as his own. Why should I trust you? Because despite everything that happened between us, I know you want the truth, and I know you're smart enough to recognize it when you hear it. Against my better judgment, I found myself considering it. Bradley was manipulative, controlling, and vindictive, but he was also brilliant, and he didn't make moves without calculating all the angles. 1 hour, I said, and I'm bringing Amelia. Fair enough, I'll see you at 3. After he hung up, I sat staring at the photograph. Miranda and Caldwell looked happy, intimate, completely oblivious to being watched. Who had taken this picture? And why give it to me now? I called Amelia and explained the situation. She agreed to accompany me to the meeting, though she warned me to be cautious. Your ex-husband is fishing, she said. He's trying to create doubt about the legitimacy of your position so he can argue that your actions as manager were invalid. But what if he's right? What if the promotion decision was corrupt? Then we deal with it honestly. But we don't let him manipulate us into making decisions based on speculation and innuendo. The Blue Door hadn't changed much in the 5 years since Bradley and I had divorced. Same mismatched furniture, same eclectic art on the walls, same smell of coffee and pastries. But sitting across from him now, watching him sip his espresso with the same precise movements I remembered, felt surreal. Amelia sat beside me, legal pad ready, every inch the professional attorney. Bradley had come alone, which surprised me. Thank you for coming, he said. I know this is awkward. Cut the pleasantries, Bradley. You said you had information. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. What I'm about to tell you is confidential client information, but given the circumstances, I believe disclosure is warranted. He slid a document across the table. It was a termination agreement dated 6 months ago. Harrison Caldwell was fired from Morrison Tech for having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. The company paid him a substantial severance to avoid a scandal. I stared at the document. This can't be right. Caldwell is still VP of Business Development. No, he's not. He hasn't been employed by Morrison Tech for 6 months, but someone has been using his credentials and access codes to conduct business. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying that someone has been impersonating Harrison Caldwell, someone with intimate knowledge of the company's operations and access to internal systems. Amelia leaned forward. That's a serious allegation. Do you have proof? Bradley pulled out another document. Digital forensic analysis of email traffic from Caldwell's account. The patterns are all wrong. Different typing speeds, different vocabulary patterns, different IP addresses. Who's been using his account? We're still investigating, but we have suspicions. He pulled out the photograph I'd received earlier, along with several others. They showed Miranda and the man I thought was Caldwell in various locations. Restaurants, hotels, the office after hours. Look closely at the metadata, Bradley said, pointing to timestamps and location data. These photos were taken over a period of several months, but here's the interesting part. Some of them were taken after Caldwell's official termination date. I studied the images more carefully. The man's face was always partially obscured or turned away from the camera. You think this isn't Caldwell? I think someone wanted you to believe it was Caldwell. Someone who benefited from having you think the promotion process was corrupt. My mind raced through the implications. Why would someone do that? To discredit your position, to create grounds for challenging the terminations, to manipulate you into making decisions that would benefit them. Benefit who? Bradley hesitated. That's where things get complicated. He pulled out a financial document. Veronica, Dennis, and Priya didn't contact me. I was contacted by someone else. Someone who offered to pay my fees to represent them. Who? Initially, I thought it was Caldwell. The communications came from his email account. But given what we've discovered about that account being compromised, you don't know who your real client is. No, and that's a violation of legal ethics that could cost me my license. I sat back, trying to process everything. So, you're here to warn me? I'm here because I realized I was being used. Someone is playing a very sophisticated game, and we're all pawns in it. Amelia had been taking notes throughout the conversation. Mr. Kellerman, are you withdrawing as counsel for the terminated employees? I'm filing a motion to withdraw, citing conflict of interest and client identity issues. The case will be dismissed unless they find new representation. That seems convenient, I said. Bradley met my eyes. Josephine, I know I've given you every reason not to trust me. Our marriage, the divorce, I handled all of it badly. I let my ego and my need to control everything destroy something that should have been precious to me. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever Bradley showed flashes of the man I'd fallen in love with. Why are you really here, Bradley? Because I think you're in danger. Someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to manipulate this situation. They've committed identity theft, fraud, and possibly worse. And they're not done. What do you mean? He pulled out his phone and showed me a message. I received this morning. The text read, "The situation with Morrison Tech needs to be resolved quickly. Payment depends on results. Don't disappoint us." Us? Amelia asked. That's what concerns me. This isn't one person with a grudge. This is organized. A chill ran down my spine. Why would someone go to these lengths over a departmental management position? Maybe it's not about the position itself. Maybe it's about what you might discover in that position. I thought about my access to company systems, financial records, client information. As department manager, I could see everything. Budget allocations, project costs, vendor payments. You think there's something hidden in the company finances? I think someone is very worried about what you might find now that you have access to examine things closely. Amelia closed her legal pad. Mr. Kellerman, if you believe a crime has been committed, you should contact the authorities. With what evidence? Suspicious email patterns and anonymous payments. The FBI won't open an investigation based on that. But they might if they had a credible witness willing to cooperate, I said slowly. Bradley nodded. That's what I was hoping you'd say. We spent the next hour developing a plan. Bradley would formally withdraw from representing my former colleagues and turn over all communications with his mysterious client to the FBI. Amelia would conduct a comprehensive audit of Morrison Tech's financial systems, looking for irregularities. And I would document everything I could access from my new position. It felt strange working with Bradley again. Despite everything that had happened between us, we'd always been effective partners when we focused on a common goal. That compatibility was part of what had made our marriage work for as long as it did. There's one more thing, Bradley said as we prepared to leave. The person behind this, they know you well. They anticipated your reactions, your moves. They used your own competence and work ethic against you. Meaning it's probably someone close to you, someone who's been watching you for a long time. The thought made my skin crawl. Any suspects? That's what we need to figure out. As we left the blue door, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate threat of the wrongful termination suit was gone, but it had been replaced by something much more sinister. Someone had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to manipulate me into a position where I could be controlled or discredited. They'd used my former colleagues, created fake evidence, and possibly committed multiple felonies. But why? Back at the office, I began reviewing financial records with new eyes. Morrison Tech was a mid-sized company with annual revenues of about $50 million. We had contracts with several government agencies and Fortune 500 companies. Nothing that should attract organized criminal interest, unless someone was stealing from those contracts. I pulled up vendor payment records for the past year. Most were routine: office supplies, software licenses, consulting fees. But there were several payments to companies I didn't recognize, large payments. Apex Solutions, $127,000 for technical consulting. Strategic Systems, Inc., $89,000 for project management. Digital Dynamics, LLC, $156,000 for software development. I searched our project database for references to these vendors. Nothing. No contracts, no deliverables, no project records. Ghost vendors. Companies that existed only on paper, receiving payments for services never rendered. My hands shook as I calculated the total. Over $800,000 in the past year alone. Enough to fund salaries for several employees or justify keeping someone like me from looking too closely at the books. I printed everything and called Amelia. I found something, I said. We need to talk. An hour later, Amelia was in my office reviewing the financial records. Her expression grew more grave with each document. This is embezzlement, she said finally. Large-scale systematic theft. How long has it been going on? These payments go back 3 years. Probably longer, but I'd need access to archived records to be sure. Who authorized these payments? Amelia checked the approval codes. They're all authorized by Miranda, but they required a secondary approval from the department head, which would have been Miranda too, since she was both the boss and the acting department head after the previous manager left. Exactly. She had the perfect setup to steal money and cover her tracks. I leaned back in my chair. So someone killed Miranda to cover up the embezzlement, then tried to manipulate me into the position so they could control me, or discredit you if you discovered the theft. But Miranda wasn't killed. She was just fired. Amelia looked uncomfortable. About that. I made some calls after our conversation with your ex-husband. Miranda wasn't just fired. She was arrested. Arrested? For what? Driving under the influence. She crashed into a family of 4 on her way home from the termination meeting. 2 of them are in critical condition. The room seemed to spin. Was it really an accident? The police think so. Her blood alcohol was 3 times the legal limit. But the timing is suspicious. Someone got her drunk and pointed her toward that intersection. That's a very serious accusation, Josephine. It's a very serious situation. I thought about Miranda's state of mind when she left the building. Devastated, humiliated, but not visibly intoxicated. She'd been upset, but coherent. Where did she go between leaving here and the accident? I don't know, but I can find out. While Amelia made calls, I continued reviewing financial records. The ghost vendor payments were just the beginning. There were also inflated consulting fees, duplicate invoices, and contracts with companies that seemed to exist only in cyberspace. Someone had been using Morrison Tech as their personal bank account for years. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Stop digging. Some secrets are better left buried. I showed the message to Amelia when she returned. We're calling the FBI, she said. This has gone beyond corporate misconduct. Wait, let me try something first. I opened my laptop and began typing a response to the anonymous number. I know about the ghost vendors. I know about the embezzlement. If you want to make a deal, we should talk. The response came within minutes. Parking garage, level B2, 1 hour, come alone. Amelia shook her head. Absolutely not. We're not playing games with criminals. What if this is our chance to get answers? To understand who's behind all this? What if it's a trap? What if they plan to eliminate the one person who can expose them? I stared at the message. Meeting an anonymous criminal in an underground parking garage was obviously dangerous. But walking away meant letting them disappear and leaving too many questions unanswered. I'll wear a wire, I said. You can monitor from nearby. If anything goes wrong, you call for backup. This is insane. This whole situation is insane, but I'm tired of being a pawn in someone else's game. An hour later, I stood in the parking garage wearing a recording device that Amelia had borrowed from a private investigator friend. My phone was set to dial 911 with the touch of a button. The garage was mostly empty, just a few cars scattered across the dimly lit space. I waited near the elevator, trying to control my breathing. Footsteps echoed from behind a concrete pillar. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Priya. Hello, Josephine, she said, her voice eerily calm. Priya? You're behind all this? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm behind some of it, but not all. The embezzlement. That was Miranda's idea. She needed money for her gambling debts. I just helped her cover her tracks. By setting up ghost vendors? By creating digital paper trails that would pass casual inspection. Miranda was smart, but she wasn't technically sophisticated. I tried to process this information. Quiet, gossipy Priya was actually a criminal mastermind. Why involve me? Why the elaborate scheme with my promotion? Because Miranda got greedy. She started taking larger amounts, getting careless. We needed her gone and someone controllable in her place. Someone controllable? Veronica would have been perfect. Incompetent, insecure, easy to manipulate. She would have signed whatever we put in front of her. But I got the job instead, thanks to your ex-husband's investigation into Harrison Caldwell. That wasn't part of our plan. My mind raced. Bradley's investigation into Caldwell was legitimate? Completely. Caldwell was having an affair with Miranda, just like the evidence suggested. But we didn't fake that evidence. We just made sure it came to light at the right time. To discredit the promotion process. To create doubt about your authority. If your promotion was tainted, any decisions you made could be challenged, including the decision to fire you. Exactly. We were planning to sue the company, get reinstated with back pay, and return to our profitable little arrangement. But Bradley figured out you were manipulating him. Priya's expression darkened. Your ex-husband is more clever than we anticipated. When he started asking questions about client identity and payment sources, we had to accelerate our timeline. What timeline? The timeline for eliminating loose ends. A chill ran down my spine. What happened to Miranda? Miranda got drunk and crashed her car. Tragic accident. You got her drunk. I bought her drinks. She chose to consume them. She chose to drive. The casual way Priya discussed what amounted to attempted murder made my blood run cold. You've been stealing from the company for 3 years. How much? About $2 million total. Not bad for a small operation. Small operation? This involves multiple people. Me, Miranda, and one outside partner. Though Miranda was becoming a liability. Who's the outside partner? Priya smiled. Someone with access to create fake companies, falsify vendor credentials, and launder money through legitimate business channels. Someone in finance? Someone in finance at our parent company. Morrison Tech is just one subsidiary. The same scheme has been running in 6 different locations. I thought about Morrison Tech's parent corporation, Meridian Holdings. A vast network of subsidiaries and shell companies that would be perfect for hiding financial fraud. How much total? Across all subsidiaries? About $15 million over 4 years. The scope was staggering. This wasn't simple embezzlement. It was organized corporate fraud on a massive scale. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to help us finish the job. What job? One final transfer. $5 million from Morrison Tech's Capital Development Fund to a series of offshore accounts. Then we disappear. I'll never help you steal more money. Yes, you will. Because if you don't, more people are going to have accidents. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was Bradley, sitting in his car outside his office building. He looks peaceful, doesn't he? Be a shame if something happened to him on his drive home. My heart pounded. You're threatening Bradley? I'm explaining the consequences of non-cooperation. Your ex-husband has been very helpful, but his usefulness has reached its end. What do you want me to do? Transfer the money. I'll provide the routing information. You have access to the Capital Development Fund as department manager. That would require board approval for an amount that large. Not if it's structured as multiple smaller transfers over several days. Emergency consulting fees, urgent equipment purchases, critical software licenses. You're creative. You'll figure it out. I stared at her, trying to reconcile this cold criminal with the gossipy coworker I thought I knew. How long have you been planning this? Years. Since I started working here. Did you really think I took this job because I loved filing reports and managing schedules? I have a computer science degree from MIT and an MBA from Wharton. I was recruited specifically for this operation. Recruited by who? Someone who saw an opportunity to exploit Morrison Tech's financial systems and needed inside help to execute it. Your outside partner. My employer. Morrison Tech was never my real job. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Priya had been a plant from the beginning, inserted into the company specifically to steal money. What about Veronica and Dennis? Are they involved? Useful idiots. Veronica was supposed to get the promotion, which would have made our final phase much simpler. Dennis was just camouflage, someone to make our little group look like ordinary office workers instead of a theft operation. But they were genuinely trying to sabotage my promotion. Of course, I encouraged their resentment and gave them just enough information to make their campaign effective. People are remarkably easy to manipulate when you understand their insecurities. I thought about all the times Priya had been there during my colleagues' complaints about me, nodding sympathetically, offering suggestions, fanning the flames of their jealousy. You orchestrated everything. I orchestrated what I could control. Some things, like your ex-husband's involvement, were unexpected complications that required adaptation, but you adapted. That's what good thieves do. We adjust to changing circumstances. My phone vibrated with a text message. Priya glanced at it and frowned. Problem? I asked. Time to go. You have 48 hours to make the transfers. If the money isn't moved by Friday, your ex-husband will have a very unfortunate accident. Wait, I need more information. Account numbers? Transfer protocols? You'll receive instructions tomorrow. For now, just remember what's at stake. She started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Josephine? If you're thinking about recording this conversation or involving the police, remember that we have surveillance on several people you care about. Your ex-husband, your sister, your elderly neighbor who walks her dog every morning at 7. Accidents can happen to anyone. With that, she disappeared into the shadows between the parked cars. I stood frozen for several minutes, processing what I'd learned. Priya was a professional criminal who'd infiltrated Morrison Tech years ago. She and her unknown partner had stolen millions from multiple companies. Miranda had been their inside accomplice until she became a liability, and now they wanted me to help them steal 5 million more, or they'd kill Bradley. I walked back to my car on shaking legs. The recording device felt heavy against my chest. Every footstep echoed in the empty garage. Amelia was waiting in the security office, monitoring my location through GPS. When I walked in, she immediately saw my expression. What happened? I told her everything, playing back the recording. Her face grew pale as she listened to Priya's casual discussion of embezzlement and murder. We're calling the FBI now, she said. This is way beyond corporate crime. She threatened Bradley and my sister. If you don't involve the police, you become an accessory to theft and potentially murder. These people have already shown they're willing to kill to protect their operation. But if I transfer the money, they'll kill you anyway. You know too much about their operation to be allowed to live. The cold logic was undeniable. Priya and her partner had eliminated Miranda when she became inconvenient. They'd do the same to me once I'd served their purpose. What do? We set a trap. We pretend to cooperate while building a case that will put them away permanently. Amelia called a contact at the FBI while I sat in her office, trying to process everything I'd learned. The Morrison Tech I thought I knew was actually a front for organized crime. My colleagues weren't just petty office politicians. One was a professional thief and the others were unwitting pawns. And somehow, my divorce from Bradley had accidentally exposed part of their operation. Agent Rebecca Torres arrived within an hour. She was a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd seen plenty of corporate crime in her career. Ms. Chen, we've been tracking financial irregularities in Meridian Holding subsidiaries for several months. Your recording confirmed some of our suspicions. You've been investigating Morrison Tech? We've been investigating a network of shell companies that seem to exist solely to receive payments from legitimate businesses. Morrison Tech is one of several companies making suspicious payments to these entities. She showed me a chart mapping connections between various companies and offshore accounts. Morrison Tech was just one node in a vast web of financial fraud. How much money total? Conservative estimate? About 50 million over 5 years. Possibly more. We're still tracing all the connections. The scope was breathtaking. I'd stumbled into the middle of a massive criminal enterprise. What do you need from me? Cooperation with the money transfer. We want to trace where the funds go, identify all the participants, and gather evidence for prosecution. You want me to actually steal the money? We want you to appear to steal the money while we monitor every step of the process. The transfers will be reversed before the funds leave federal jurisdiction. What about the threats against Bradley and my sister? We'll provide protection, but the best way to ensure their safety is to capture the people threatening them. Agent Torres outlined a plan that made me nervous but seemed logical. I would go through with the transfers while wearing a wire and using monitored systems. The FBI would track the money trail and arrest everyone involved simultaneously. What if something goes wrong? We'll have agents positioned throughout the building and monitoring all communications. If there's any sign of danger, we'll intervene immediately. And if Priya realizes it's a trap, that's a risk. But these criminals have been operating for years without detection. They're confident, maybe overconfident. They expect you to cooperate out of fear. I thought about Bradley, probably sitting in his office right now, unaware that his life was in danger. About my sister, living her normal life 3 states away. About the elderly woman next door who walked her ancient beagle every morning and always waved when she saw me. Okay, I said, let's do it. The next morning, I arrived at work wearing a wire and carrying a briefcase full of FBI monitoring equipment disguised as routine business materials. Agent Torres and her team were positioned in a surveillance van outside the building. At 9:47 a.m., my computer received an encrypted email with transfer instructions. 16 separate transactions, each under the threshold that would trigger automatic review. The money would be moved to holding accounts at 6 different banks before being consolidated and transferred offshore. It was sophisticated, systematic, and almost certainly untraceable without law enforcement cooperation. I began the first transfer, documenting each step for the FBI recording. As department manager, I had access to make emergency expenditures up to $500,000 without board approval, exactly the limit Priya had specified for each transaction. The first transfer went through smoothly. I categorized it as emergency consulting fees for a critical software patch. The second was equipment replacement due to unexpected hardware failure. By lunch, I'd moved $2.5 million into accounts I'd never heard of. My phone buzzed with a text from Priya. Good progress. Continue this afternoon. I texted back. This is making me nervous. Are you sure we won't get caught? Trust the process. Everything is under control. But something felt wrong. The transfers were going too smoothly, and Priya seemed too relaxed for someone orchestrating a major theft. During lunch, I called Agent Torres. Something's bothering me, I said. This feels too easy. How so? Priya is a computer expert who's been planning this for years. She knows these systems better than anyone. Why would she need me to make the transfers when she could probably do it herself? There was a pause. That's a good question. What if this isn't about stealing the money? What if it's about making it look like I stole the money? Explain. Think about it. If the FBI is investigating financial irregularities in Meridian Holdings subsidiaries, and suddenly $5 million goes missing from Morrison Tech right after I become department manager, who looks guilty? You do. Exactly. Priya and her partner disappear with the money they've already stolen, and I take the blame for this final theft. It's the perfect exit strategy. Agent Torres was quiet for several seconds. We need to reconsider our approach. What do you mean? I mean we might be walking into a trap designed to frame you for everything. My blood ran cold. So what do? We spring our own trap, continue with the transfers, but we're going to modify the plan. An hour later, I was back at my desk, continuing the money transfers while the FBI adjusted their surveillance strategy. Instead of waiting to trace where the money went, they were going to intercept it at the holding accounts and arrest anyone who tried to access it. As I initiated the 13th transfer, my office door opened. Priya walked in, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the same innocent smile I'd seen her use with customers. "How's your day going?" she asked casually. "Fine, just catching up on some administrative tasks." She glanced at my computer screen. "Looks complicated. Year-end budget adjustments, nothing exciting. Mind if I sit? I wanted to talk about my unemployment claim." The audacity was remarkable. She was sitting in my office, watching me steal money at her direction, while casually discussing her unemployment benefits. "What about it? I'm hoping you won't contest it. Despite our differences, I think we can both agree that the termination was sudden. I'll consider it." She leaned forward slightly. "I appreciate that. You know, despite everything that happened, I always respected your work ethic. You're very thorough." There was something in her tone that made me look up from my computer. She was staring directly at me, her expression suddenly cold. "Very thorough," she repeated. "The kind of person who documents everything, who keeps detailed records, who might even record conversations." My heart stopped. She knew about the wire. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't." She stood up, still smiling. "Well, I should let you get back to your administrative tasks. Don't work too late. You never know what might happen to people who stay in the office after hours." After she left, I sat frozen for several minutes. She knew. Somehow, she'd figured out that I was working with law enforcement. I touched my earpiece, a nearly invisible device that allowed me to communicate with the FBI surveillance team. "She knows," I whispered. Agent Torres's voice was calm but urgent. "Are you in immediate danger?" "I don't think so, but she knows about the recording." "Continue with the transfers. We're adjusting our timeline." I completed the remaining transactions in a daze. With each transfer, I felt more like I was signing my own arrest warrant. If this was a setup, I was providing all the evidence needed to convict myself of embezzlement. At 4:17 p.m., I sent the final transfer. $5 million had been moved from Morrison Tech's accounts to a maze of holding companies and offshore banks. My computer immediately received a message. "Phase 1 complete. Report to parking garage level B2 for final instructions." I gathered my things, turned off my computer, and headed for the elevator. The office felt different now. Every colleague looked like a potential threat. Every security camera seemed to be watching me specifically. In the elevator, I whispered to my FBI contact, "Heading to the parking garage. She wants to meet again. We're in position. Remember, if you feel unsafe, use the code word." The parking garage was darker than yesterday, with several burned-out lights creating pockets of shadow. I found Priya waiting by the same concrete pillar, but this time she wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit stood beside her. He was tall, thin, with silver hair and the kind of practiced smile I associated with corporate executives. "Josephine," Priya said, "I'd like you to meet my partner." The man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Richard Kellerman. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." My knees nearly buckled. Kellerman. Bradley's last name. "You're related to Bradley?" "His uncle. I'm also a partner at Kellerman & Associates, though I specialize in corporate finance rather than employment law." The family connection explained how he'd known to manipulate Bradley's investigation. He'd been feeding his nephew information while using him to gather intelligence on me. "You're the one behind all this." I prefer to think of myself as an opportunist. When I learned that my nephew's ex-wife worked for a Morrison Tech subsidiary, I saw potential for a mutually beneficial arrangement. Beneficial for who? For me, primarily. Morrison Tech has been funding my retirement through irregular consulting fees for several years, but all good things must come to an end. He gestured toward my briefcase. "I assume you've completed the transfers?" "The money's been moved." "Excellent. Now for the final phase." He pulled out a tablet and showed me a document. "This is your confession. It details how you embezzled $5 million using your access as department manager. Very thorough, very convincing." "I'm not signing that." "Of course you are, because the alternative is much worse." He nodded to Priya, who pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It was security footage from Bradley's office building, showing him walking to his car. "He has a routine," Richard said. "Leaves his office at 6:15 every evening, stops at the same coffee shop, takes the same route home. Very predictable." "What do you want?" "I want you to sign the confession. You'll also transfer an additional $2 million from the company's emergency fund. Consider it a bonus for your cooperation. I don't have access to the emergency fund, but you know someone who does. Your new friend Amelia Torres has the authorization codes." My blood chilled. They knew about my collaboration with the general counsel. "How do you know about your conversations with Morrison Tech's legal department?" "Please. We've been monitoring company communications for months. Did you think we'd miss your meeting yesterday?" He was right. If they'd been intercepting corporate communications, they would know about my conversations with Amelia, my cooperation with the FBI, everything. "You know I'm working with law enforcement." "We know you think you're working with law enforcement," Priya said, "but Agent Rebecca Torres isn't FBI." The world tilted. "What?" "She's an actress we hired. Very convincing, though. The fake badge, the surveillance van, the whole elaborate setup. I particularly enjoyed the part about protecting your ex-husband while we were already monitoring his every move. I felt like I was falling through empty space. The FBI investigation was fake. The protection was fake. The plan to catch the criminals was fake. The recording equipment? Functional, but it's recording to our servers, not federal ones. We needed to know exactly what you were thinking, how much you discovered, who you might have contacted. But the wire is transmitting to that van outside? Yes. staffed by our people. Richard smiled. We've been listening to your conversations with Agent Torres all day. Very illuminating. Every detail of my cooperation had been monitored by the people I was trying to catch. They knew everything I knew, everyone I'd contacted, every move I'd planned to make. Why the elaborate deception? Why not just take the money and disappear? Because we needed someone to take the blame, Priya said. And we needed that someone to be completely convincing. A confused victim who genuinely believed she was helping law enforcement would be much more credible than a knowing accomplice. You've been planning to frame me from the beginning, from the moment we learned about your connection to Bradley, Richard confirmed. His investigation into Harrison Caldwell was legitimate, by the way. We just made sure he discovered exactly what we wanted him to discover, when we wanted him to discover it. And Miranda was becoming unreliable. Too much gambling, too much drinking, too much attention. We nudged her toward that final accident, but she made the choice to drink and drive. The casual admission of murder made my stomach turn. These people had killed Miranda as coldly as they'd manipulated everyone else. What happens now? Now you sign the confession and make one more transfer. Then you disappear, voluntarily or otherwise. And if I refuse? Richard nodded to Priya, who held up her phone again. This time, the screen showed a live video feed of my sister's apartment building. Jessica has such a lovely view from her balcony, he said. 12 floors up. Very dangerous if someone were to accidentally fall. The threat was clear. Cooperate or watch my sister die. I stared at the confession document. It was thorough, detailing a pattern of embezzlement that stretched back months. It explained my motive, financial pressure from my divorce. It described my method, using management access to create fake vendors and authorize fraudulent payments. It even included forged evidence of offshore accounts in my name. How long have you been planning this? Since we learned about Bradley's investigation into Morrison Tech, we realized that his ex-wife working here was too perfect an opportunity to waste. You manipulated our entire divorce? We influenced certain aspects. Your ex-husband's financial aggression, for instance. We made sure he left you in a precarious position that would make embezzlement seem plausible. The scope of their manipulation was staggering. They'd been controlling my life for months, maybe years, setting up the perfect circumstances to frame me for their crimes. Sign the document, Richard said. Then call Amelia Torres and ask her to meet you here. Tell her you need emergency authorization for additional transfers. She won't come alone. She will if you sound desperate enough. If you convince her that you're in danger and need immediate help. I looked at the confession again. Signing it would make me legally responsible for millions in theft, but refusing would cost my sister's life. I need a pen, I said. Richard smiled and handed me an expensive fountain pen. I thought you might. I signed the document with shaking hands. Each letter felt like a nail in my own coffin. Excellent. Now call Amelia. I pulled out my phone and dialed the general counsel's number. When she answered, I tried to make my voice sound panicked. Amelia? It's Josephine. I need your help. Can you meet me in the parking garage? Level B2? Josephine, what's wrong? You sound upset. I can't explain over the phone. Just please come and bring your authorization codes for the emergency fund. Why would you need, please? I think I'm in serious trouble. There was a pause. I'll be right there. I hung up and looked at Richard. She's coming. Good. When she arrives, you'll tell her that you've been embezzling money and need her help to transfer additional funds to cover your tracks. You'll explain that if she doesn't help, you'll implicate her in the scheme. She'll never believe that. She will if you're convincing, and you will be convincing because your sister's life depends on it. We waited in the shadows between parked cars. Richard checked his watch periodically while Priya monitored something on her phone, probably the live feed from my sister's apartment. 10 minutes later, Amelia's car pulled into the parking garage. She parked near the elevator and looked around nervously before walking toward our section. Josephine? She called. Where are you? I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. I'm here. Amelia hurried toward me, her expression full of concern. What's going on? Why are we meeting here? Because she has something to tell you, Richard said, emerging from the shadows with Priya beside him. Amelia stopped short. Who are these people? They're the ones I've been working with, I said, hating every word. The ones who helped me steal the money. What money? Josephine, what are you talking about? I've been embezzling from Morrison Tech, $5 million so far, and I need your help to transfer more. Amelia stared at me in shock. That's impossible. You would never. I was desperate, I continued, following the script Richard had outlined. The divorce left me in debt. I saw an opportunity and I took it. This is insane. You're one of the most honest people I know. People change when they're desperate enough. Amelia looked between me and the two strangers. Even if what you're saying is true, I can't help you steal more money. You can and you will, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her a photo of her teenage daughter. Because if you don't, Lauren might have an accident on her way home from school tomorrow. The photo had been on Priya's phone. They'd been watching Amelia's family too. Amelia's face went white. You're threatening my daughter? I'm explaining the situation. Transfer the money and everyone stays safe. Refuse and people get hurt. Richard stepped forward. Ms. Torres, you're a reasonable woman. Your colleague here has gotten herself into serious trouble, and now she needs your help to resolve it quietly. By stealing more money? By completing a transaction that's already in progress. The money will be replaced before anyone notices it's gone. It was a lie, of course. There was no plan to replace anything, but Amelia didn't know that. How much? She asked quietly. $2 million. Emergency transfer to cover immediate operating expenses. That will require board approval. Not if it's categorized as critical infrastructure maintenance. You have emergency authorization for that. Amelia stood silently for a long moment, weighing her options. I could see her calculating the risks, trying to find a way out that wouldn't endanger her daughter. If I do this, she said finally, how do I know you'll leave my family alone? Because we'll disappear after tonight, Richard said. This is the last transaction. After this, you'll never see us again. Another lie. They couldn't afford to leave witnesses who knew their identities. I need my laptop, Amelia said. The transfer has to be done through the secure system at my office. No, Priya said immediately. Too many security cameras, too much digital tracking. You'll do it from my laptop using remote access. She pulled out a computer and opened it on the hood of a nearby car. Log into the corporate system. Amelia hesitated. This isn't right. Even if Josephine is in trouble, stealing more money isn't the solution. The solution is keeping everyone alive, I said. Just do the transfer. As Amelia typed in her login credentials, I felt sick. I was forcing a good person to commit a crime to save lives that were probably already forfeit. Richard and Priya had no intention of letting any of us survive this. The system is asking for secondary authorization, Amelia said. Use emergency protocols, Richard instructed. Natural disaster recovery procedures. But there's no natural disaster. There will be if you don't cooperate. Amelia's hands shook as she navigated through the system. She was accessing accounts with millions of dollars, protected by layers of security and oversight. Under normal circumstances, moving this much money would require approval from multiple board members and extensive documentation. I can't do this, she said suddenly, stepping back from the laptop. I won't steal money, and I won't be part of threatening innocent people. Richard sighed. Priya? Priya held up her phone, showing the live video of my sister's apartment. Jessica just got home from work. She's making dinner. Looks like pasta. On the screen, I could see my sister moving around her kitchen, completely unaware that criminals were watching her every move. Please, I said to Amelia. I know this is wrong, but they'll kill her if we don't cooperate. And they'll kill us if we do cooperate, Amelia replied. Can't you see that? They can't let us live knowing what we know. She was right, of course. But what choice did we have? Complete the transfer, Richard said, his voice losing its corporate politeness. Now. No, Amelia said firmly. I won't help you steal money, and I won't be intimidated by threats. Richard nodded to Priya, who made a phone call. It's time, she said into the phone. Proceed with the apartment. Wait, I screamed. Don't hurt her. Then convince your friend to cooperate. I grabbed Amelia's arm. Please, they'll kill my sister. Josephine, listen to me. These people are going to kill all of us regardless. Your sister, my daughter, everyone who knows about this. The only way to stop them is to refuse to give them what they want. But if there's a chance, there's no chance. Look at them. Really look at them. I turned to study Richard and Priya. Richard was checking his watch with the impatience of someone who had a schedule to keep. Priya was reviewing something on her phone with the detachment of someone reading a grocery list. They were professionals, cold, efficient, and completely without empathy. Amelia was right. They'd never intended to let us live. You're right, I said quietly. We're already dead. Not necessarily, Amelia replied. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well make it difficult for them. She grabbed the laptop and smashed it against the concrete floor. The screen shattered, sparks flew, and the hard drive made a grinding noise as it died. That was stupid, Richard said. Now your sister dies for nothing. Maybe, Amelia said. But you don't get the money either. Priya was already on her phone. The targets are not cooperating. Proceed with all contingencies. My heart broke thinking about my sister, but I felt a strange sense of relief. At least we wouldn't be complicit in our own destruction. You have no idea what you've done, Richard said. We have backup plans for situations like this. I'm sure you do, Amelia replied. But you don't have the money. We have $5 million already. That's enough for now. Actually, you don't, a new voice said from behind us. We turned to see Agent Rebecca Torres walking toward us, flanked by 4 other people in FBI jackets. Unlike yesterday, she looked completely professional and carried herself with unmistakable authority. Agent Torres, FBI, she said, showing her badge to Richard and Priya. You're both under arrest. I stared at her in confusion. But Priya said you were fake, that the whole investigation was fake. Ms. Patel was misinformed, Torres replied, though I'm impressed by the elaborate deception they constructed to convince you otherwise. The actress was one of our undercover agents. We've been tracking this criminal organization for 18 months. When you contacted us yesterday, it provided the perfect opportunity to gather evidence and protect potential victims. Priya tried to run, but was immediately tackled by one of the agents. Richard stood perfectly still, already calculating his legal options. The money transfers? I asked. Intercepted and reversed. The funds are being returned to Morrison Tech's accounts as we speak. My sister has been under protective surveillance since yesterday. She's safe. Amelia's daughter? Also safe. We've had teams watching everyone they threatened. As the agents handcuffed Richard and Priya, I felt my legs give out. Amelia caught me before I collapsed completely. It's over, she said. It's really over. But Agent Torres looked grim. Actually, it's just beginning. This operation involved at least 12 people across 6 companies. We've arrested the local cell, but the larger organization is still operational. Meaning? Meaning you're both going to need protection until we can dismantle the entire network. These people don't give up easily. As they led Richard and Priya away, Richard looked back at me with cold fury. This isn't finished, he said. We have resources you can't imagine. People in places you'll never expect. Empty threats, Agent Torres said. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. But I noticed she didn't seem entirely convinced. 6 months later, I was living in a safe house in Colorado under federal protection. The trial had been a media sensation. Corporate embezzlement, family betrayal, and murder conspiracy. Richard Kellerman received life without parole. Priya got 25 years. Miranda survived her injuries but was sentenced to 15 years for her role in the embezzlement. Veronica and Dennis were cleared of any criminal wrongdoing, though they were fired from Morrison Tech for their role in undermining company operations. Veronica found work at a small accounting firm where her dramatic personality fit right in. Dennis started his own consulting business and, rumor had it, actually stopped drinking during work hours. Morrison Tech offered me a substantial settlement and a permanent position as chief security officer. The company had implemented new financial controls that made the kind of systematic theft I'd uncovered virtually impossible. Bradley visited me in Colorado. Our conversation was awkward but necessary. I'm sorry, he said, for everything. The divorce, the manipulation, using you as leverage against my own uncle. You couldn't have known he was a criminal. I should have known he was using me. Should have been more careful about sharing information about you. We sat on the porch of the safe house, watching mountains in the distance and trying to reconcile our shared past with our separate futures. Do you think we could have made it work? He asked. If circumstances had been different? Maybe. But circumstances weren't different. We became different people, and those people weren't compatible. No regrets? About the divorce? No. About the way it happened? Yes. For what it's worth, you handled this whole situation better than I would have. You were braver than I ever was. After he left, I called my sister. She'd moved to a new apartment and changed jobs, but she was gradually returning to normal life. When are you coming home? She asked. Soon. The FBI thinks they've identified most of the network. A few more arrests and I should be clear to resume normal life. What does normal life look like for you now? It was a good question. The woman who'd gone to work at Morrison Tech 6 months ago wouldn't recognize the person I'd become. I'd learned I was capable of things I'd never imagined, both good and bad. I don't know yet, but I'm looking forward to finding out. 3 weeks later, Agent Torres called with news. We got him, she said. The head of the operation. Turns out Richard Kellerman was middle management. The real boss was running similar schemes in 14 states. Who was it? Corporate executive named Harrison Caldwell. My blood ran cold. Caldwell? But he was the victim in Bradley's investigation. No, he was the mastermind. The whole affair with Miranda was a setup to create a cover story. He used his legitimate business relationships to identify vulnerable companies, then inserted operatives like Priya to steal from them systematically. So the Caldwell that Miranda was having an affair with was the real Caldwell? He cultivated that relationship specifically to gain access to Morrison Tech's financial systems through her. But the termination documents, forged. Caldwell was never fired. He was using his legitimate position to facilitate the thefts while creating paper trails that pointed to other people. It was brilliant and terrifying. Caldwell had used his actual corporate position to steal millions while making it look like the victims were other employees. Is it really over now? It's really over. You can go home. Home. I wasn't even sure where that was anymore. I returned to Morrison Tech as chief security officer, implementing systems designed to prevent the kind of elaborate fraud I'd uncovered. It was satisfying work, but I found myself looking over my shoulder for months. The trauma of being manipulated so completely had left lasting effects. I had trouble trusting new people and found myself analyzing every interaction for signs of deception. But gradually, I began to rebuild. I started dating someone, a teacher named Marcus, who had no connection to corporate America and thought my story sounded like something from a thriller novel. He was kind, straightforward, and completely incapable of the kind of manipulation I'd experienced. My sister and I grew closer, bonded by our shared experience of being targeted by criminals. She even moved to my city, taking a job at a nonprofit that helped victims of financial crimes. Bradley and I maintained a careful friendship. He left his uncle's firm and started his own practice, specializing in helping small businesses protect themselves from fraud. We had lunch occasionally and found we could be friends in a way we'd never managed as spouses. But the most unexpected development was my relationship with Amelia Torres. We'd been through something traumatic together, and it had created a bond that went beyond typical professional relationships. She left Morrison Tech to start her own legal practice, and I became her first client when I decided to write a book about my experiences. You should tell the story, she said. Not just for yourself, but for other people who might find themselves in similar situations. Who would want to read about corporate embezzlement and workplace manipulation? Anyone who's ever felt powerless in their job. Anyone who's been betrayed by people they trusted. Anyone who wonders if they're strong enough to fight back when everything goes wrong. The book took 2 years to write. It was harder than I expected to relive those months, to analyze the mistakes I'd made and the signs I'd missed. But it was also therapeutic. The book became a bestseller, partly because the story was so outrageous that people couldn't believe it was true. I appeared on talk shows and spoke at conferences about corporate fraud and workplace manipulation, but the most meaningful response came from readers who wrote to tell me their own stories. People who'd been bullied, manipulated, and betrayed in their workplaces. People who'd felt powerless against institutional corruption. Your story gave me the courage to report my supervisor for sexual harassment, one woman wrote. I'd been afraid no one would believe me, but you showed that sometimes the truth really does win. 5 years after the events at Morrison Tech, I was invited back to speak at the company's annual security conference. Walking into the building felt surreal, like visiting a place from a dream. The conference room was packed with employees I didn't recognize. Morrison Tech had grown significantly since the fraud case, partly because the publicity had actually enhanced the company's reputation for taking financial crimes seriously. Ladies and gentlemen, the CEO said, introducing me, I'd like you to meet the person who saved our company from becoming a cautionary tale about corporate crime. But as I looked out at the audience, I didn't see a room full of people I'd saved. I saw a room full of people who could find themselves in similar situations if they weren't careful. What happened here 5 years ago wasn't unique, I began. Corporate fraud happens everywhere, perpetrated by people who look and act like ordinary employees. The difference is whether organizations and individuals are prepared to recognize it and fight back. After my presentation, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous but determined. Ms. Chen? I think something similar might be happening at my company. Could we talk? And so the cycle began again. But this time, I was ready to help someone else fight back. Driving home from Morrison Tech that evening, I thought about how much my life had changed. I'd gone from being a victim of workplace manipulation to becoming someone who helped others recognize and resist it. The woman I'd been 5 years ago, desperate for promotion, willing to work endless hours for recognition, accepting mistreatment as the price of professional success, seemed like a stranger now. I'd learned that the most important skill in any workplace isn't technical expertise or political savvy. It's the ability to recognize when you're being manipulated and the courage to resist it. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How did the presentation go? Good, I replied. But I think I have a new project. Another book? Another fight? Because that's what I'd become. Someone who fights back. Someone who refuses to be a victim. Someone who helps other people refuse to be victims too. It wasn't the career path I'd planned, but it was the one I'd earned. And for the first time in my professional life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The parking lot at Morrison Tech was almost empty as I drove away. But unlike that terrifying evening 5 years ago when I'd watched my ex-husband walking toward my sabotaging coworkers, this time I felt powerful instead of powerless. I'd survived corporate manipulation, criminal conspiracy, and personal betrayal. I'd helped expose a multi-million-dollar fraud ring and put dangerous people in prison. But most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about becoming someone they could never control in the first place. As I drove into the sunset, heading home to the life I'd built from the ashes of the one that had been taken from me, I smiled. The game was over, and I had won.
My dad said, "You'll never make it without my money," until I bought the house next to his for cash. He'd said it my entire life, when I wanted to go to state college instead of his alma mater, when I chose marketing over law, when I started my own business at 23 instead of joining his firm. Every time I made a decision he didn't approve of, he'd lean back in his leather chair and deliver the same line. "You'll regret this. You need me." My mom would sit there silently, picking at her salad, pretending she didn't hear. My older brother would smirk. He'd taken the safe route, working under Dad, living in the house Dad bought him. "Just take the money," he'd tell me. Pride doesn't pay bills, but I didn't want his money. I wanted to prove I didn't need it. For 5 years, I lived in a studio apartment with 3 roommates. I ate ramen and worked 80-hour weeks building my marketing agency from nothing. While my brother posted vacation photos from Dad's timeshare in Cabo, I was sleeping in my office. When my first big contract fell through, Dad called. "Come work for me. This independence fantasy is over." I hung up and landed 2 bigger clients that month. By year 7, my agency had 15 employees. Year 9, we hit our first million in revenue. Dad never congratulated me. He'd just say things like, "Let me know when you need a bailout." At family dinners, he'd ask pointed questions designed to expose my failures. "How's that little business? Still breaking even?" Last month, I closed a deal worth $2.3 million. The house next to my parents went up for sale. It was bigger than theirs, better maintained, with a view of the lake they'd always envied. Asking price was $890,000. I called my realtor and made an all-cash offer for $920,000. No inspection, no contingencies. The sellers accepted within an hour. I didn't tell anyone. Moving day, I watched from my new kitchen window as my dad came outside to see what the commotion was, his face when he saw me directing movers. My mom actually dropped her coffee mug. My brother pulled up 20 minutes later. He stood in Dad's driveway just staring. Dad marched over that afternoon. "Where did you get this kind of money?" he demanded. I handed him my company's quarterly report. He scanned it, his face turning red. "This doesn't mean anything. Markets change. You'll lose it all." "Maybe," I said, "but I won't lose it to you." That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, things have gotten weird. My mom started texting me separately, asking to meet for coffee. My brother stopped by twice, both times when Dad wasn't home. The first time, he asked about job openings at my company. "Dad's cutting my salary," he said quietly. "Says I need to prove myself now." Then yesterday morning, I found an envelope on my doorstep. Inside was a legal document, a copy of Dad's will from 2019. Someone had highlighted a section. It stated that my brother would inherit 70% of everything, with the remaining 30% split between me and Mom, but only if we remained in good standing with the family. Below that, a sticky note in Mom's handwriting read, "There's a new version. You need to see it." I was still holding the envelope when my phone rang. It was Dad's attorney. "Your father's had a stroke. He's at Memorial Hospital. You should come." I drove there, my mind racing. My brother's car was already in the lot. When I walked into the ICU waiting room, he looked up with hollow eyes. "They don't think he's going to make it," he whispered. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Dad changed the will last week. Everything goes to someone else entirely. Mom's been disinherited. We both have been." That's when Mom appeared from the hallway, her face pale. "I need to talk to you both," she said, "about why your father really didn't want you to succeed." She glanced nervously at the ICU doors. "He's been hiding something for 30 years. Something that explains everything. And now the person he left everything to is standing in that room with him right now." I looked through the small window in the ICU door. A woman stood beside Dad's bed. She was maybe 28, with dark hair pulled into a neat bun. She held Dad's hand and was crying softly. I'd never seen her before in my life. "Who is that?" I asked. Mom's voice cracked. "Her name is Violet. She's your father's daughter." The words didn't register at first. My brother made a choking sound. I just stared at Mom, waiting for her to explain how that was possible. "Your father had an affair 29 years ago," Mom said. Her hands were shaking. "With his secretary at the firm. When she got pregnant, he paid her to leave the state and keep quiet. He's been supporting them ever since. Violet grew up in Oregon with her mother. Your father visited them twice a year. He paid for everything. Her school, her college, her apartment. While he was cutting your allowance," she looked at my brother, "and refusing to help you," she looked at me, "he was sending Violet $5,000 a month." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "You knew about this?" "Not until 3 months ago." Mom sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs. "I found bank statements he'd hidden. Transfers going back decades. When I confronted him, he said it was too late to fix anything. That Violet deserved his money more than any of us because she was the only one who never disappointed him." My brother's face had gone white. "So all those years he said I wasn't working hard enough, wasn't worthy of his respect. It was because he was comparing you to her," Mom finished. "She became a doctor, pediatric oncology. She volunteers at free clinics. She's everything he wanted you both to be, and he got to take credit for none of it while blaming you for everything." I walked to the window again. Violet was still holding Dad's hand. She looked genuinely devastated. A nurse entered and said something to her. She nodded, wiped her eyes, then leaned down and kissed Dad's forehead. "She doesn't know about us, does she?" I said. "She knows he has a family," Mom said, "but I don't think she knows the details. Her mother died 2 years ago. Cancer. Your father paid for all the treatments. He was there when she passed. He told me he was at a conference in Seattle. The door to the ICU opened. Violet walked out, her eyes red. She saw the 3 of us and froze. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, she said, "You must be his family, and you must be the reason my father spent 30 years making us feel worthless," my brother said coldly. Violet's face crumpled. "I don't understand. He told me he was going to finally tell you about me, that he wanted us all to meet. That's why I came when the hospital called." "Did he also tell you he left you everything?" my brother demanded. That he cut his wife and both his sons out of his will to give it all to you? What? No! Violet looked genuinely shocked. That's not— he wouldn't do that. Apparently he did, I said. My voice sounded strange, detached. Last week, his attorney just called my mom before you showed up. Violet shook her head. There has to be a mistake. He said he was fixing things, making things right. I thought that meant bringing the family together, not— She pulled her phone from her pocket. Let me call his lawyer. This can't be right. She walked away, phone pressed to her ear. I watched her through the hospital windows, pacing back and forth in the parking lot. Mom put her hand on my arm. I'm so sorry. I should have told you both as soon as I found out. I just kept hoping it would all turn out to be some kind of misunderstanding. How much are we talking about? My brother asked quietly. How much is he worth? The business is valued at $8.7 million, Mom said. The house and properties, another $3 million. Investment accounts, retirement funds, life insurance, all together somewhere around $15 million. I did the math in my head. $15 million. Going to a woman we'd never met. While Dad had spent our entire lives withholding everything from us, using money as a weapon to control us, to make us feel small. And now I understood why. It was never about us not being good enough. It was about him feeling guilty. Every time he looked at us, he saw his betrayal of Mom, his secret family, his lie that he'd been living for 3 decades. So he punished us for existing, for being evidence of the life he'd built on deception. Violet came back inside. Her face was ashen. I just spoke with Howard. That's his attorney. He said the will is valid. It was changed 8 days ago. Everything goes to me with one exception. There's a letter he left for each of you. Howard is supposed to read them after— She couldn't finish the sentence. After he dies, my brother said flatly. I don't want this, Violet said, her voice rising. I don't want any of it. This isn't right. You're his sons. You grew up with him. You deserve— We deserve nothing, I interrupted. According to him, that's what he spent our whole lives telling us. A doctor emerged from the ICU. Family of Richard Thornton? We all turned. The doctor's expression told me everything before he spoke. I'm sorry. We did everything we could. He's gone. Mom made us sound like she'd been struck. My brother just stood there, staring at nothing. I felt empty, completely hollow. I should have been sad. I should have felt something. But all I could think was that my father had died without ever once telling me he was proud of me. And now I knew why. He'd been saving all his pride for someone else. The next 3 days were a blur. Funeral arrangements, phone calls with the attorney, estate paperwork. Violet tried to talk to us several times, but my brother refused to be in the same room with her. Mom was too broken to do anything but sit in her bedroom, staring at old photos. I was the one who had to handle everything, just like always. The funeral was on a Thursday. Small. Dad hadn't had many friends. Most of the people there were business associates who'd come out of obligation. Violet sat in the back, trying to be invisible. Mom sat in the front, her face like stone. My brother didn't come at all. He'd texted me that morning. Can't do it. Can't sit there and pretend to mourn him. I didn't blame him. After the service, Howard pulled me aside. The reading of the will is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. at my office. I know this is difficult timing, but your father was very specific about the timeline. Will there be surprises beyond the ones we already know about? I asked. Howard adjusted his glasses. Your father's final instructions are complicated. I think it's best if everyone is present to hear them together. That night, I sat in my new house next door to the empty house my parents had lived in for 35 years. I could see into the dark windows. Could imagine Dad sitting in his study, plotting how to hurt us one more time, even after death. My phone buzzed. A text from Violet. Please come tomorrow. I need you to understand I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't respond. The next day, Howard's office was on the 12th floor of a building downtown. When I arrived, Mom was already there, wearing all black. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 4 days. Violet sat across from her, keeping her distance. My brother showed up 10 minutes late, his jaw clenched. Howard cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. I know this is painful. Richard was my client for 22 years, and I can honestly say this is one of the most unusual wills I've ever handled. He opened a folder. Before we get to the distribution of assets, Richard left individual letters for each of you. He insisted these be read aloud in order. First, to his wife Claire. He handed Mom an envelope. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single page. She read it silently first, her face going through a series of expressions: shock, anger, disgust. Then she read it aloud. Claire, by the time you hear this, you'll have discovered the truth about Violet. I know you've spent the last 3 months hating me for it. You should. I was a coward and a liar, but you need to understand something. I never loved you. Not really. I married you because my father told me to. Because your family had money and connections. Because it was good for business. The only time I ever felt truly alive was when I was with Violet's mother. She loved me without condition, without expectation. When she died, part of me died with her. I stayed with you out of obligation. Nothing more. You wasted your life on a man who never deserved you. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not sorry for finding real love, even if it was stolen moments. Take your 30% from the 2019 will if you can prove this new will is invalid. I suspect you'll try. Good luck with that. The silence that followed was crushing. Mom's hands trembled so badly she dropped the paper. I picked it up and saw Dad's signature at the bottom, dated 2 weeks ago. That son of a bitch, my brother whispered. Howard looked uncomfortable. I advised Richard against this approach for what it's worth. Now to his eldest son, Thomas. My brother flinched at hearing his name. Howard handed him an envelope. Thomas opened it roughly, nearly tearing the paper. He scanned it, his face turning red, then crumpled it without reading it aloud. Read it, Mom said. Her voice was hard. We're all suffering. Share it. Thomas smoothed out the paper, his hands balled into fists. Thomas, you were my biggest disappointment. I gave you every advantage. put you through the best schools, hired you at my company with a salary you didn't earn, and you've done nothing but coast on my name your entire life. You're 37 years old, and you've never had an original thought, never closed a deal without me doing the heavy lifting, never shown an ounce of the drive or ambition that built what you've been feeding off of like a parasite. When I told people about my children, I never mentioned you. I just talk about your brother's agency and then change the subject. You are the living embodiment of wasted potential. I'm leaving you nothing because you just waste it like you've wasted everything else I ever gave you. Maybe now you'll finally learn what it means to work for something. Thomas threw the letter across the room. Fuck him. Fuck all of this. He stormed out. The door slammed behind him. I didn't try to stop him. Howard looked at me. And for his youngest son, Raymond. My heart was pounding as he handed me the envelope. I thought I'd been ready for whatever Dad had to say. I wasn't. Raymond, you're reading this and probably thinking you've won. You bought the house next to ours. You built a successful business. You proved you didn't need me. Congratulations. You want to know the truth? The only reason I pushed you so hard was because I saw real potential in you. Not like your brother. You had fire, drive, intelligence, but you also had pride, arrogance. You thought you were better than me, better than the family. So I gave you exactly what you wanted. Nothing. And you thrived on that nothing. Turned it into something real. I'm actually proud of you for that, though I'll never say it to your face. But here's what you don't understand. Every major contract you've closed in the last 3 years, I made a phone call first. Every client who took a chance on your unproven agency, they owed me favors. You think you built your success on your own? You built it on my foundation, my reputation, my connections. Without me, you're nothing. You just don't know it yet. And now you'll never be sure which parts of your success were really yours. That uncertainty will eat at you for the rest of your life. You're welcome for that. I stared at the words until they blurred. My hands weren't shaking. I felt very calm, very still. Is that true? I asked Howard. Did he make calls? I honestly don't know, Howard said quietly. Richard made many calls over the years. Whether any of them were related to your business, I couldn't say. He never mentioned it to me. I set the letter down carefully. Precisely. Everything in me wanted to scream, to throw things, to burn Dad's letter the way Thomas had wanted to. But I didn't. I just sat there, my mind replaying every client meeting, every deal, every success I'd thought was mine. Had any of it been real? There's one more letter, Howard said. To Violet. He handed it to her. She'd been silent through all of this, tears streaming down her face. She opened the envelope slowly. Read it aloud, I said. My voice was cold. Seems like we're all sharing today. Violet looked at me, then at Howard, then back at the letter. She cleared her throat. Violet, my dear girl. You are the one pure thing in my complicated life. From the moment you were born, you were perfect. Your mother was an incredible woman, and she raised you to be even better. I'm sorry I couldn't be there more. Sorry I couldn't claim you publicly. But I watched you from a distance with more pride than you'll ever know. You became a doctor. You helped children who are suffering. You volunteer your time. You never asked me for anything beyond what I freely gave. My legitimate sons turned into men I barely recognize. One a leech, one too proud to accept help. My wife stayed for money and status, not love. But you stayed because you loved me. Because you wanted nothing from me except the occasional phone call, the rare weekend visit. That's worth more than anything money can buy. I'm leaving you everything because you deserve it. Use it to save more children, to make the world better. Don't let the others manipulate you into giving them anything. They'll try. They'll say I was wrong, that they deserve something. They don't. They had everything and squandered it. You had nothing and became everything. With all my love, Dad. The room fell silent. Violet was sobbing openly now. I'm so sorry. I didn't know he felt this way about you. About any of you. He never said these things. He saved them for after death, I said, because he was a coward. Raymond, Mom said sharply, but she didn't argue. Howard pulled out more paperwork. The estate is valued at $14.8 million after final accounting. Per Richard's wishes, it all transfers to Violet Chen, with the exception of the Lakeview house. That was left to Claire with the stipulation that she has 60 days to buy out Richard's 50% share at market value, or the house will be sold and the proceeds added to Violet's inheritance. I don't have that kind of money, Mom said. The house is worth $2.4 million. I'd need $1.2 million in cash. I know, Howard said gently. Richard knew that too. So Dad had taken everything. The business he'd built, the investments, the life insurance, and he'd made sure Mom would lose the house too. Either she'd have to drain whatever savings she had, or she'd be forced out. There is one final item, Howard continued. Richard left instructions for a challenge. A challenge? I repeated. Yes, he called it the succession game. Howard pulled out another document. Richard was aware that this would be contested. He actually expected it. So he created an alternative, a way for his legitimate heirs to earn back some of what was taken from them. Violet leaned forward. What kind of game? A business competition, Howard explained. Richard's company, Thornton Enterprises, is currently valued at $8.7 million. Richard has stipulated that if Raymond and Thomas can increase the company's value to $12 million within 1 year, the company will be split 3 ways, 1/3 to each son, 1/3 to Violet. If they fail, Violet keeps the entire company as planned. That's insane, I said. We don't even work there. Thomas doesn't have the first clue how to run a company, and I have my own business. Which is why Richard thought it was a perfect test, Howard said. He's giving you access to the company for 1 year, full control. You'll work together or compete, that's up to you. But if you can prove you're capable of growing his legacy, you'll earn it. If you can't, Violet gets everything as the will states. What if we just refuse? I asked. Then the will stands as written. Violet gets everything. The clock starts today, whether you participate or not. I looked at my brother's empty chair, then at Mom, who was staring at nothing, then at Violet, who looked like she wanted to disappear. I need time to think, I said. You have 24 hours to decide, Howard replied. After that, if you decline, Violet takes possession of all assets immediately. I drove home in a daze. My phone rang 6 times. Thomas. I didn't answer. I couldn't talk to him yet. Couldn't process what Dad had done. Every major contract you've closed in the last 3 years, I made a phone call first. Had he really? Or was that just one final knife in my back? A last attempt to make me doubt myself. I pulled into my driveway and sat there, staring at my parents' house next door. All the lights were off. Tomorrow, Mom would have to start figuring out how to buy out a house she'd lived in for 35 years, or lose it entirely. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Violet. I know you probably hate me. I understand. But I need you to know I'm going to refuse the inheritance. I don't want it. None of this is right. I stared at the message. Then I typed back, don't. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. What do you mean? I mean, don't refuse it, not yet. Meet me tomorrow, noon. The address of Thornton Enterprises. Come alone. Okay. I got out of my car and walked to my front door. As I unlocked it, I looked back at Dad's house one more time. A light turned on in the master bedroom. Mom was home, probably packing, probably trying to figure out where she'd go. Inside, I poured myself a drink and sat in my living room. The room Dad had seen through the windows, the success he'd claimed to have engineered. I pulled up my phone and started scrolling through my client list. 3 years of contracts. I found the dates, found the correspondence, found the proposals. Then I started making calls. To current clients, to former clients, to competitors who'd lost bids to me. Hey, it's Raymond Thornton. Quick question. Did my father ever contact you before we started working together? I made 23 calls that night. Got through to 16 people. Every single one said the same thing. No, we'd heard of your agency through industry reputation. Your proposal was just better. But 7 didn't answer. 7 maybes. 7 possibilities that Dad had been telling the truth. At 2 a.m., my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. Thomas stood there looking worse than I'd ever seen him. I opened the door. He's right, Thomas said without preamble. Everything he said about me. I'm 37 years old and I've got nothing. No skills, no prospects. Dad's been paying me $180,000 a year to do bullshit busy work, and everyone at the company knows it. He laughed bitterly. You know what the VP of operations said to me at the Christmas party last year? He said, must be nice being born lucky. I thought he was talking about being born rich. Now I realize he meant lucky that Dad didn't expect anything from me, that I could coast forever without consequences. Come inside, I said. He followed me to the living room. I poured him a drink. We sat in silence for a minute. Are you going to do it? He asked. The challenge? I don't know. Are you? I don't even know what I'd do. I don't know how to run a company. I've never closed a real deal. Never built anything. I'm 37 and I have the resume of a 22-year-old. Dad did that to you, I said. No. Thomas shook his head. I did that to myself. Dad gave me an easy path and I took it. Every time. I knew I was being lazy. Knew I wasn't learning anything real. But it was comfortable. And I told myself it was smart. Why work hard when you don't have to? Now I see what it cost me. He drained his glass. I'm going to do the challenge. I don't care if I fail. I don't care if Violet ends up with everything anyway. I just need to prove to myself that I can build something, earn something. Will you help me? I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. He'd spent 37 years being the good son, the obedient one, the one who did exactly what Dad wanted. And Dad had hated him for it. Yeah, I said. I'll help you. Even though you don't need to, you've already got your own company, your own success. Maybe. Or maybe Dad was right and everything I built was because of him. Either way, I need to know. Thomas nodded slowly. So we grow his company to $12 million, take our third each, and prove we're not the disappointments he said we are. Something like that. What about Violet? What about her? She seems decent. None of this is her fault. I know. That's the worst part. Thomas stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. Thanks for not giving up on me. Everyone else did a long time ago. You're my brother, I said. That has to mean something. After he left, I sat alone until sunrise, thinking about the challenge. About what it would take to grow a company by $3.3 million in 1 year. About whether I even wanted to. But I knew I didn't really have a choice. Not because I needed the money. I didn't. My agency was doing fine. But because if I walked away, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if Dad had been right. If I'd really built my success alone. Or if I'd been standing on a foundation I didn't know existed. At noon, the next day, I pulled up to Thornton Enterprises. It was a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. Dad had moved the office here 5 years ago. I'd never been inside. Violet was waiting in the lobby. She dressed professionally, slacks and a blazer, trying to look like she belonged here. I could see traces of Dad in her features, the same sharp jawline, same dark eyes. Thanks for meeting me, she said. Let's walk. We left the building and headed toward the Riverwalk. It was a cold November day, the kind where your breath fogs and you can't feel your fingers. I meant what I said, Violet started. I'm going to refuse the inheritance. I've already talked to Howard about the process. Don't. Raymond, I can't take $15 million from people I just met. People whose father I apparently destroyed. You didn't destroy anything. He did that himself. Still, it's not right. I stopped walking and turned to face her. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept the inheritance, all of it. Then my brother and I are going to do this challenge. We're going to grow that company. And when we succeed, if we succeed, you're going to get your third. Same as us. Why would you do that? Because my father spent his life using money to punish people, to control them, to measure their worth. I'm not doing that. If you refuse the inheritance out of guilt, you're just letting him win one more time. Take the money. Use it for your clinic. Save kids. Be exactly what he said you were. The one good thing that came out of his miserable life. Violet's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to accept this. You don't have to know. You just have to say yes. She wiped her eyes. What if you and Thomas fail? What if the company doesn't grow? Then you still keep everything. And honestly, that wouldn't be the worst outcome. At least the money would go somewhere good. Tell me about your business, Violet said suddenly. Your agency. I did. I told her about the studio apartment with 3 roommates, about the 80-hour weeks, about every contract I'd fought for and won, about buying the house next to my parents just to prove I could. Your father called me 3 weeks ago, Violet said when I finished. He was furious. Said you'd humiliated him in front of the neighbors, that you'd thrown your success in his face. That was the plan. He also said he'd never been more proud of anything in his life. I stopped walking. He said that? Yes. He said you'd become exactly what he'd hoped for. Self-made, driven, successful without his help. He said it proved he was right to be hard on you. That's sick. I know, but I think in his twisted way, he believed he was helping you, pushing you to be better by withholding everything. That's not how parenting works. No, Violet agreed. It's not. My mom was the opposite. She gave me everything. Support, encouragement, love, and I still became a doctor. Maybe even more so because I had someone who believed in me. She looked out at the river. I think your father was broken in ways he never admitted. My mom used to say he was trying to heal something in himself by being different with me than he was with his legitimate family. Like he thought he could erase his mistakes by getting it right the second time. Did he? Get it right with you? Some parts. He was kind to me, supportive, but he was also living a double life, which meant I only got fragments of him. Birthday phone calls, weekend visits every 6 months. He missed my high school graduation because it conflicted with your brother's. He missed my white coat ceremony because he was at your mother's charity gala. I got the better version of him, but I never got all of him. We walked in silence for a while. I need to ask you something, I said. That letter he wrote you, the one about your mother being the love of his life, did you know he felt that way? Yes, he told me that once, when I was 16. He was drunk. He said my mom was the only woman who ever made him feel like he was enough, that his marriage was a business arrangement that had gone on too long. I felt so guilty after that, like I was part of some terrible sin. You were a kid. None of it was your fault. Maybe, but I benefited from it. From his guilt money. From being the secret daughter he could pretend was perfect because I only existed in stolen moments. Are you perfect? Violet laughed. No, I have $170,000 in student loans. My apartment is a shoebox. I work 60-hour weeks and barely have time to date. Last month I made a diagnosis error that almost killed a patient. I fixed it in time, but it scared the hell out of me. See? Human. Unfortunately, we turned back toward the building. So we're doing this? I asked. All 3 of us? I guess we are. Violet paused. Can I ask you something? Why did you really buy that house? Was it just to prove something to your father? I thought about it. Honestly, I don't even know anymore. When I signed the contract, I felt like I was winning, like I'd finally beaten him at his own game, but now I just feel empty, like I won a game that didn't matter. Maybe that's the point, Violet said. Maybe he was never playing the same game as you. You were trying to prove your worth. He was trying to justify his guilt. We reached the entrance to Thornton Enterprises. Through the glass, I could see employees moving through the lobby, people who'd worked for my father, who'd know Thomas and me as the boss's sons, who probably had opinions about both of us. Let's go see what we're working with, I said. Inside, we met with the CFO, a woman named Patricia who'd been with the company for 15 years. She laid out the financials in a conference room that smelled like coffee and copy paper. Current valuation is $8.7 million, Patricia explained, pulling up a presentation on the screen. Revenue last year was $12, $4 million with a net profit of $2.1 million. Your father ran a lean operation. Good margins, solid client base, minimal debt. What's the growth trajectory been? I asked. Flat for the last 3 years, Patricia admitted. Your father was approaching retirement. He stopped pursuing new business aggressively. We've retained existing clients well, but haven't expanded. So we need to add about $3.3 million in value in 1 year, I said. What's the fastest path to that? Depends on the approach. We could pursue rapid client acquisition, which would increase revenue and potentially boost valuation. We could streamline operations to improve profit margins, which makes the company more attractive. Or we could pursue a strategic acquisition, buy a smaller competitor and fold them in, instantly increasing our market share. Thomas had joined us halfway through the presentation. He'd been quiet, taking notes. Now he spoke up. What would Dad have done? Patricia looked uncomfortable. Richard would have said none of the above. He'd have said the company is worth what it's worth, and trying to artificially inflate that for a deadline is bad business. Good thing he's not here then, Thomas said. Over the next week, the 3 of us, me, Thomas, and Violet, started meeting daily at Thornton Enterprises. Violet had taken a leave of absence from the hospital. I need to understand what I'm inheriting, she'd explained, even if I end up only getting a third. Thomas dove in with surprising intensity. He'd spent years coasting, but now he was working 12-hour days, learning every aspect of the business. He sat with department heads, reviewed every contract, interviewed every employee about what was working and what wasn't. You're actually good at this, I told him, after watching him handle a tense meeting with a client who was threatening to leave. No, I'm not, Thomas said, but I'm learning. Finally, I split my time between my own agency and Thornton Enterprises. It was exhausting, but necessary. I needed to see if I could grow both businesses simultaneously. Needed to prove that my success wasn't dependent on Dad's shadow. By the end of week 2, we had a plan. It was aggressive, maybe too aggressive, but it was the only path to $12 million in 1 year. We acquire Merit Solutions, I proposed in a meeting with Patricia and the senior leadership team. Merit was a smaller marketing firm that complemented Thornton's services. They were struggling financially but had great clients and talented people. They're valued at $2.8 million, but I think we can get them for $2 million cash. We don't have $2 million liquid, Patricia pointed out. No, but we can leverage the company's assets for a loan. Use the existing business as collateral. That's risky, Patricia said. If the acquisition doesn't pay off, we're in debt and no better positioned. Everything about this is risky, Thomas said. But it's the only way. The leadership team voted. It passed barely. 3 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstention. I spent the next month negotiating the acquisition while Thomas worked on integration plans and Violet surprised all of us. She started attending client meetings. At first, I thought she was just observing, learning about the family business she'd inherited. But then she started contributing, asking questions that exposed problems we hadn't seen, suggesting solutions that actually worked. I'm good at reading people, she explained after she helped us save a major contract by identifying that the client was really upset about a billing error, not the quality of work. It's part of being a doctor. You listen to what people say and hear what they mean. By December, we'd closed the Merit Solutions acquisition. It was messy. The integration was harder than expected. We lost 3 employees who didn't want to work for a Thornton. We had to renegotiate contracts, fix broken processes, merge competing teams. But slowly, it started working. The combined company had more capabilities, better market position, and a stronger pipeline. In January, Thomas landed the biggest contract of his life, a 3-year deal with a healthcare company worth $8 million annually. He handled every aspect himself: the pitch, the negotiation, the close. When he walked into the office after signing the papers, the entire team stood and applauded. He called me that night, crying. "I did it. I actually did it." "You did," I said. "You really did." By March, we were ahead of schedule. The company was valued at $11.2 million. We needed another $800,000 to hit the target, but then everything fell apart. One of our largest clients, who represented 20% of our annual revenue, announced they were going with a competitor. The CEO called to apologize, but it was done. Signed contract. The revenue hit would drop our valuation below $10 million. All our progress gone. "We can get them back," Thomas insisted in an emergency meeting. "Let me talk to them." "They've already signed with someone else," Patricia said. "It's over." "Then we find new clients," Violet said. "We have 4 months. We can make up $800,000 in 4 months." "Not in this market," Patricia said. "New business takes time to develop, time we don't have." I sat there, my mind racing through possibilities. There had to be a way, had to be something we could do. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Raymond Thornton?" a voice said. "Yes. This is Gerald Chen from Chen Industries. I'm Violet's grandfather on her mother's side. I heard about Richard's challenge, about what you're trying to do. I'm impressed." I put the call on speaker. "Thank you, but we just lost a major client. We're probably not going to make the deadline." "I know. That client is now working with one of my companies. I may have encouraged them to make the switch." The room went silent. Violet's face went white. "You sabotaged us?" I said. "I tested you," Gerald corrected. "Richard spent 29 years paying my daughter to keep quiet about Violet. He treated her like a shameful secret. When she was dying, he set up a trust fund for Violet, but he made her promise never to contact his real family, never disrupt his life. My daughter agreed because she didn't want Violet to suffer, but I never made that promise." "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to offer you a deal. I'll become a client. A $2 million annual contract. 3 years guaranteed. It'll push your valuation well past $12 million. In exchange for what?" "In exchange for bringing Violet into the family publicly. No more secret daughter. No more hiding her like Richard did. You acknowledge her. Introduce her to everyone as your sister. Make her a full partner in everything that matters." I looked at Violet. She was crying silently. "And if we say no?" I asked. "Then you fail the challenge. Violet inherits everything anyway, but she'll always be the outsider. The secret shame. Richard's final insult to her mother's memory." Thomas spoke up. "We don't need your contract. We'll find another way." "No, you won't," Gerald said bluntly. "You have 4 months. The math doesn't work. This is the only option." "Let us discuss it," I said. "We'll call you back." I hung up. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Violet said, "I don't want this. Don't let him force you into something you're not ready for." "Are you kidding?" Thomas said. "You've been working alongside us for 5 months. You've earned a place here. The only reason we haven't already introduced you as our sister is because we've been too busy trying to hit an impossible deadline." "He's right," I said. "This isn't about the contract. This is about us acknowledging something that should have been acknowledged 29 years ago. Your family, that shouldn't be contingent on business deals." "But it is," Violet said quietly. "That's exactly what this is. A transaction. Just like everything else with your father." She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't entirely right either. "What if we called your grandfather back and told him to keep his contract?" I said. "But we still introduce you publicly as our sister. We still make you a full partner. We do it because it's right, not because of a business deal." "Then you fail the challenge," Violet pointed out. "Maybe that's okay," Thomas said. "Maybe some things matter more than proving something to a dead man." Patricia cleared her throat. "For what it's worth, there might be another option. I've been approached by Kendrick Global. They want to acquire Thornton Enterprises. Full buyout. They're offering $15.2 million. Every head in the room turned to her. "You're just mentioning this now?" I said. "It came in this morning. I was going to discuss it in our regular meeting tomorrow. But given the situation," she pulled up the email on her laptop. "They want to move fast. They'd close within 60 days. If we sell to them, we win the challenge," Thomas said slowly. "The company would be valued at over $15 million, way past the $12 million target. But then none of us would have the company," I pointed out. "The whole point was to earn it back from Violet." "Actually," Patricia said, "the challenge didn't specify that you had to retain ownership. It just said you had to increase the value to $12 million within 1 year. If we sell at $15.2 million, you've technically succeeded. The proceeds would be split according to the terms, 1/3 to each of you. So we'd each get about $5 million, not the $8.7 million we'd hoped for by keeping the company, but still substantial. There's a catch," Patricia continued. "Kendrick wants to retain all current leadership. They'd offer positions to each of you as consultants during the transition, but after 1 year, you'd be out. So Dad's company disappears," Thomas said. becomes part of someone else's portfolio. Does that matter? Violet asked. It was a good question. Did it matter? We'd been working for 5 months to save a company that Dad had used as a weapon against us our entire lives. A company he'd cared more about than his own children. Why should we care about preserving it? I need some air, I said. I walked out to the parking lot, Violet following me. We stood by my car, the March wind cutting through our jackets. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. What do you want? I asked first. I laughed despite myself. Honestly, part of me wants to sell, take the money, walk away from all of this. But another part of me thinks about the last 5 months, about watching Thomas become a real businessman, about seeing you discover you're good at this, about finally working together as siblings instead of as competitors. We barely know each other, Violet said. True, but I know you better after 5 months than I knew my father after 32 years. She considered this. Gerald will be furious if we sell instead of accepting his deal. Is that a bad thing? He's my grandfather. He's trying to protect me. By sabotaging our client relationships? By forcing us into a transaction? He's using Richard's playbook, Violet admitted. Money and leverage. It's all he knows. Then let's show him there's another way. We went back inside. The team was still in the conference room, arguing about the Kendrick offer. We're going to decline both offers, I announced. Everyone stared at me. The Kendrick buyout and Gerald's contract. We're saying no to both. Then how do we hit $12 million on? Patricia asked. We don't, I said. We missed the deadline. Violet keeps the company as originally planned in Dad's will, but she keeps us on as full partners. Equal stakes, equal say. We build this business together, the right way. I can't just give you ownership, Violet said. That would be gift taxes alone. Then we buy in, Thomas interrupted. We each buy a third, fair market value. We take out loans if we have to. At $8.7 million divided by 3, that's roughly $2.9 million each, Patricia calculated. Neither of you has that kind of capital. My agency is worth about $3.2 million, I said. I could leverage that for a loan, or sell it entirely. You'd give up your business? Violet asked. It's time. I built it to prove I didn't need my father. I've proven that. Now maybe I can build something with my family instead. Thomas nodded. I've got about $400,000 in savings. I can borrow the rest against my future stake in the company, if Violet will sign off on that. This is insane, Patricia said. You're turning down a guaranteed $5 million each to gamble on buying into a company that's valued at less. Yes, the three of us said simultaneously. Patricia stared at us for a long moment. Then she laughed. You three are definitely related, all equally stubborn. Over the next week, we restructured everything. I sold my agency to a competitor for $3.1 million. It hurt more than I expected. That business had been my proof that I could succeed without Dad, but it was also my past. Time to move forward. Thomas secured financing through 3 different banks. He'd leveraged every relationship he'd built over the past 5 months. Violet signed the paperwork making us equal partners in Thornton Enterprises. We legally changed the name to Thornton Chen Enterprises. Violet's mother's name would be part of the company now. Public. Acknowledged. When the 1-year deadline passed, I called Howard. We didn't hit the target, I told him. Company's valued at $11.2 million. We failed the challenge. I see, Howard said. So the company goes entirely to Violet per the original will? Actually, no. Violet sold us each a third for fair market value. We're now equal partners. There was a long pause. That's not what Richard intended. I know, but it's what we intend. He wanted you to fight for it, to prove yourselves. We did. Just not the way he planned. Another pause. Richard would have hated this, you know. The 3 of you working together, sharing everything equally. It goes against everything he believed. Good. Howard actually chuckled. In that case, there's one more thing. Richard left a sealed envelope with me. Instructions to open it only if you miss the deadline. Do you want to know what it says? Not particularly, but you're going to tell me anyway. It's addressed to all 3 of you. Would you like me to read it over the phone or send it? Send it. We'll read it together. That evening, the 3 of us sat in the conference room where we'd spent so many hours over the past year. The envelope sat unopened on the table. Should we even read it? Thomas asked. We know it's going to be something designed to hurt us. Or maybe it's an apology, Violet offered. One last chance for him to say he was wrong. Dad never apologized for anything, I said. But Violet's right. We should read it. Good or bad, we should know. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. Dad's handwriting, dated 2 days before his stroke. I read it aloud. To my children, if you're reading this, you failed. You couldn't grow my company by 30% in 1 year. You couldn't prove you were worth the inheritance I denied you. You couldn't even work together effectively, despite having a common goal and a shared enemy. Me. I'm not surprised. Thomas lacks discipline. Raymond lacks humility. And Violet, despite all her virtues, lacks the ruthlessness necessary for real business success. But here's what you need to understand. I designed this challenge to be almost impossible. The timeline was too short. The target was too high. I knew from the start that you'd probably fail. So why did I do it? Because I wanted you to stop fighting each other and start fighting together. I wanted Thomas to finally learn what it means to work for something. I wanted Raymond to stop needing to prove himself and start needing his family. And I wanted Violet to stop being a secret and start being a daughter. I was a terrible father, a worse husband. I destroyed my first family trying to keep my second family hidden, and destroyed my second family by never fully claiming them. I used money as a weapon because I didn't know how to use words as love. This challenge was my last attempt to fix what I broke. If you failed it, but found each other in the process, then you didn't actually fail. You won something more valuable than any company I built. If you're reading this alone, divided and bitter, then I truly did fail you one last time. But if you're reading this together, then maybe I finally got something right. I'm sorry for everything I did and everything I didn't do. You all deserved better than me. Love, Dad. The silence that followed was deafening. That manipulative son of a bitch, Thomas finally said, but he was crying. We all were. He still couldn't just say it, I said. Even in his final letter, he had to make it part of some game, some lesson. But he wasn't entirely wrong, Violet said softly. We are better together than we were apart. Doesn't excuse 30 years of abuse, Thomas said. No, Violet agreed. But maybe it explains it. Just a little. I folded the letter carefully. What do we do with this? Keep it, Thomas said. Not to remember him fondly, but to remember where we came from, what we overcame. And to remember not to repeat his mistakes, Violet added. If any of us ever have kids, we do better. We're honest. We're present. We use words instead of weapons. Deal, I said. We sat there for a while longer, none of us quite ready to leave. Outside, the city lights were coming on. Thornton Chen Enterprises occupied the top 3 floors of this building now. We'd expanded in the 6 months since restructuring, hired 12 new people, landed contracts in new markets. The company was worth about $9.8 million at last valuation. We'd actually lost value since the challenge ended, but we'd gained something more important. I have news, Violet said suddenly. I wasn't sure when to mention it, but this seems like the right time. What kind of news? Thomas asked. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air. Congratulations, I said carefully, not sure if this was happy news or complicated news. It is happy, Violet confirmed, smiling through tears. It's terrifying and unplanned and probably terrible timing, but it's happy. The father is, well, it's complicated, but I'm keeping the baby. You're going to be a mom, Thomas said wonderingly. The baby will be our niece or nephew, I finished. Violet nodded. Richard's grandchild, though they'll never meet him. Maybe that's for the best, Thomas said, then softer. We'll be better grandparents than he was a father. We'll make sure the kid knows they're wanted, loved, that they don't have to earn their place in the family. We'll make sure they know they're ours, I agreed. No secrets, no shame, just family. And that's exactly what we did. 9 months later, Violet gave birth to a daughter. She named her Claire Rose, Claire after our mother, Rose after Violet's mother. 2 women who'd suffered under Dad's deceptions, honored in one tiny person. Mom cried when she heard the name. She'd been slowly rebuilding her life after the devastation of Dad's death and revelations. She'd sold the house, couldn't afford to buy out Dad's half, just like he'd known. But instead of being broken by it, she'd found a small condo downtown and started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other women escape from controlling men. I wasted 35 years on someone who never loved me, she told me once. I'm not wasting whatever time I have left. Thomas had transformed completely. He'd moved into a modest apartment, sold the house Dad had bought him, and started living within his means. He was dating someone he'd met at a business networking event, a woman who knew nothing about the Thornton family drama and liked him for who he was, not what he represented. I'm 38 years old and I finally feel like an adult, he'd said. It's about damn time. As for me, I'd found something unexpected. Peace. I'd spent my entire adult life proving I didn't need Dad's help. Now I didn't need to prove anything. The business was growing steadily. My siblings were my partners and friends. I had a niece who would grow up knowing she was loved unconditionally. We held a small ceremony at Thornton Chen Enterprises when Claire Rose was 3 months old. A naming celebration and family acknowledgement. We invited Mom, Gerald, who'd grudgingly accepted our decision and eventually became a valued business advisor, and close friends. During the ceremony, I made a toast. My father spent his life building walls between his 2 families, between success and failure, between love and duty. He believed in scarcity, that there wasn't enough success, money, or love to go around, that for someone to win, someone else had to lose. But Claire Rose here proves he was wrong. She exists because of love that crossed barriers. She's being raised by 3 parents who share responsibilities instead of competing. She'll inherit a business built on partnership, not ownership. And she'll grow up knowing that family isn't about who deserves what. It's about showing up, working together, choosing each other every day. Dad tried to teach us his lessons through deprivation and competition. Instead, we learned different lessons, that collaboration beats rivalry, that transparency beats secrets, and that chosen family is just as real as blood family. To Claire Rose. May she grow up in a world where love isn't conditional and success isn't measured in dollars, and may she never know what it's like to have to earn a place at the table. Everyone raised their glasses. Even Gerald, who still didn't quite understand why we'd turned down his contract, but respected that we'd chosen family over business. Later that evening, after everyone had left, the 3 of us sat in my living room, the house I'd bought next to my parents' place. Mom had sold her house to a young couple with 2 kids. It had been hard for her, leaving the place she'd lived for 35 years, but she'd stood on my porch watching the moving truck pull away and said, "Good riddance to bad memories." Now my house was the gathering place. The neutral ground where we made decisions and shared meals, and watched Claire Rose learn to hold her head up. Do you think he'd be proud? Thomas asked, holding his niece carefully. If he could see us now? Honestly, I don't care, I said. We're not doing this for him. We're doing it for us, for her. But do you think he would be? Thomas pressed. I thought about it, really thought about it, about the man who'd pushed me away while secretly supporting me, who'd hated Thomas for being obedient and hated me for being independent, who'd loved Violet but hidden her like a shameful secret. I think he'd be confused, I finally said. Nothing about what we're doing fits his worldview. We're sharing instead of competing. We're transparent instead of secretive. We're choosing relationships over assets. He'd probably think we were being foolish, weak. And you don't care? Violet asked. Not even a little bit. She smiled. Good, because I talked to Howard last week. There's one more thing Dad left behind, something he didn't include in the will. What now? I groaned. A letter, sealed, addressed to Claire Rose, instructions to give it to her on her 18th birthday. You've got to be kidding me, Thomas said. He's trying to manipulate us from beyond the grave for another 18 years? That was my first thought, Violet admitted. But then I realized something. We don't have to give it to her. We could destroy it right now, choose to end his influence completely. But, I prompted, because there was clearly a but maybe it's not our choice to make. Maybe Claire Rose deserves to know who her grandfather was, the good and the bad, the complexity, and then she can decide for herself what it means. That's very mature of you, Thomas said. I hate it, but he was smiling. So we keep the letter? I asked. We keep the letter, Violet confirmed, locked away. And when she's 18, we tell her everything first. About Dad, about us, about how we all found each other. And then we give her the letter and let her decide if she wants to read it. And if she chooses not to, Thomas asked, then we burn it together and never speak of it again. It seemed like a good plan, a way to honor both the past and the future without letting either one control us. 3 years later, Thornton Chen Enterprises was valued at $16.3 million. We'd surpassed Dad's challenge target without even trying. The company was thriving not because we were desperately chasing growth, but because we'd built something stable, sustainable, based on trust instead of fear. Thomas had become CEO. He'd fought against it at first, insisting he wasn't qualified. But Violet and I had both insisted. We'd watched him grow into the role naturally over the past few years. He had a gift for leadership we'd never seen when he was just going through the motions at Dad's company. Violet had stayed active in the business while also returning to medicine part-time. She'd used her share of the company's success to fund free clinics in underserved communities, just like Dad had predicted in his final letter to her. But she was doing it on her terms, not his. And me? I discovered I was actually a decent COO. I handled operations, strategy, and growth. I finally found a balance between the independence I'd craved and the connection I'd needed. We had family dinners every Sunday. Mom would come, sometimes Gerald. Always Claire Rose, who was now a precocious 3-year-old who called all three of us uncle and auntie and mommy interchangeably because we all parented her together. One Sunday, she asked about the empty seat at our dinner table. Who sits there? She asked, pointing. We all looked at each other. That's for your grandfather, Violet said carefully. He died before you were born. Was he nice? How do you explain someone like Dad to a child? He was complicated, I said. He made mistakes, big ones. But he also built something that brought your mommy, Uncle Thomas, and Uncle Raymond together. So in a way, you exist because of him. Does he miss me? Claire Rose asked. My throat tightened. I think he would have loved you very much, in his own way. She thought about this seriously. Then, can we still save him a seat, even if he's gone? Yeah, Thomas said, his voice thick. We can do that. So we did. Every Sunday, there was an empty chair, not as a shrine to Dad, but as a reminder of where we came from, of what we'd overcome, of the family we'd chosen to build instead of the one that had been forced on us. Years passed. The business continued to grow. Claire Rose started school. Mom published a book about surviving narcissistic relationships. Thomas got married to his girlfriend, who'd stuck with him through all the family drama and loved him for the man he'd become, not the man he'd pretended to be. I started dating someone I'd met through work, someone who knew my whole messy story and didn't run away, someone who understood that family could be complicated and that success wasn't always measured in dollars. Violet had another child, a son this time. She named him Thomas Raymond, after her brothers. Are you kidding? Thomas said when she told us. You're naming him after us? Dad got to name his kids, Violet said simply. I'm naming mine after the family I actually want him to emulate. When Thomas Raymond, we called him TR to avoid confusion, was born, we held another ceremony at Thornton Chen Enterprises. This time, the company had grown to occupy an entire building. We'd expanded into new markets, acquired 2 smaller companies, built something that was genuinely valuable, not because we were chasing Dad's challenge, but because we'd created something worth building. At the ceremony, Gerald gave a speech. I've watched these 3 over the past 7 years, he said. I've seen them build a business, raise a family, create something out of pain and loss and betrayal, and I've learned something important. Richard was wrong about almost everything. He thought scarcity drove excellence, that deprivation built character, that love had to be earned. But these 3 proved that abundance creates better results, that support builds stronger people, that love should be freely given. They took everything Richard tried to destroy and built something beautiful from it. TR and Claire Rose will never know their grandfather, but they'll know something better. What it means to be part of a family that chooses love over legacy, connection over competition, and each other over everything else. Afterward, Mom pulled me aside. I need to tell you something, she said. I've been holding on to it for months, waiting for the right time. What is it? I'm sick. Early stage, but it's there. The doctors say with treatment, I've got a good shot. But it made me think about time, about what I want to say before I run out of chances. My stomach dropped. Mom, let me finish, she said gently. Your father stole 35 years from me. He took my youth, my confidence, my sense of self, but he gave me you and Thomas. And through you, I got Violet and Claire Rose and TR. He meant to destroy me, but instead he gave me the tools to rebuild myself into something stronger. I don't forgive him. I never will. But I'm grateful for what came after him, for watching my sons become good men, for gaining a daughter I never knew I needed, for grandchildren who will grow up without his poison. We're going to fight this, I said. Whatever you need, I know you will. That's what family does. Real family, not the performance your father demanded. Actual showing up, doing the work, being present family. She was right, of course. When she started treatment, we were all there, taking shifts, holding her hair, bringing smoothies, just like I'd done for Emma in that story from long ago, just like family should. The treatment worked. Mom went into remission. We celebrated at yet another Sunday dinner. Claire Rose making a card that said, Grandma is strong, with crayon drawings of all of us holding hands. Time kept moving forward. Claire Rose turned 10. Started asking questions about her grandfather. Real questions, not kid questions. Why did he have 2 families? She asked one day. We were all there. Me, Thomas, Violet, Mom, and Gerald. We'd agreed years ago that we'd never lie to her about Dad, that she deserved the truth, age-appropriate but honest. Violet took this one, because he was afraid. He made a mistake by having an affair, and then instead of being honest about it, he tried to hide it. and the hiding created more problems, more pain. Was he mean? Sometimes, Thomas said. He used money to control people. He said hurtful things. He made us feel like we had to earn his love. But he also built a successful business, I added. He supported your mom her whole life, even if he didn't do it the way he should have. He was complicated. People usually are. Do you miss him? Claire Rose asked. The three of us looked at each other. Sometimes, I admitted. Not the dad we had, but the dad we wish we'd had. Does that make sense? She nodded seriously. Then, Mom says I have a letter from him, that I'll get it when I'm 18. That's right, Violet confirmed. Do you think I should read it? That's up to you, Thomas said. We'll support whatever you decide. What if it's mean? What if he says bad things? Then we'll be there with you, I said. And we'll remind you that his words don't define you, that you're loved unconditionally, that you'll never have to earn your place in this family. She thought about this. Then, okay, I think I'll read it, when I'm ready. 8 years later, Claire Rose turned 18. She'd grown into an incredible young woman, confident, compassionate, driven. She was heading to college in the fall to study social work. She wanted to help families like ours, she said, families broken by secrets and lies. On her birthday, we gathered at Thornton Chen Enterprises. The company was now worth $43, $7 million. We'd expanded internationally, employed over 200 people, built something that mattered, but none of that mattered as much as what happened next. Violet handed Claire Rose the sealed envelope. It had sat in a safe deposit box for 18 years, untouched. You don't have to read it now, Violet said. You don't have to read it ever. This is entirely your choice. Claire Rose held the envelope for a long moment. Then she opened it. Inside was a letter, brief, to the point, very dad. She read it silently first, then aloud. Dear Claire Rose, if you're reading this, you're 18 years old, an adult, and you've grown up in a family that I helped create but never got to meet. I don't know what kind of person you've become. I don't know if you're like your mother, brilliant and compassionate, or like your Uncle Raymond, driven and proud, or like your Uncle Thomas, whatever Thomas becomes, since he's still finding himself as I write this. But I hope you're none of those things. I hope you're entirely yourself. I spent my life trying to control who people became, trying to shape them into what I thought they should be. It was my greatest failure. I created children who resented me, a wife who feared me, and a daughter I couldn't claim. I built an empire of money and loneliness. Don't do what I did. Don't try to control your destiny so much that you destroy your humanity. Don't love conditionally. Don't measure worth in dollars or success in victories over others. And don't forgive me. I don't deserve it. But do better than me. Be better than me. Love openly. Fail gracefully. Choose people over pride. If the three of them, your mother and uncles, managed to build something together after everything I did to keep them apart, then maybe there's hope for all of us. Maybe families can be built from broken pieces. Maybe love can grow in soil poisoned by betrayal. You're proof of that. You exist because broken people refuse to stay broken. Because siblings chose each other over bitterness. Because love, real love, doesn't follow the rules I tried to impose. I'm sorry I never got to meet you, but I'm glad you'll never have to meet me. You'll only know me through stories, through warning tales, through the example of what not to become. That's probably for the best. Be good, Claire Rose. Be better than all of us. With complicated love, your grandfather. The room was silent when she finished. Claire Rose folded the letter carefully and looked up at all of us. Her family, broken and rebuilt and stronger for it. He was right about one thing, she said. You all did build something better from broken pieces. You took his worst qualities and created their opposite. His control became your collaboration. His secrets became your transparency. His conditional love became your unconditional acceptance. She paused. I'm glad I read this. Not because it gives me closure or makes me forgive him, but because it helps me understand where you all came from, what you overcame, what you chose to build instead. What do you want to do with it now? Violet asked. Claire Rose walked to the empty chair we'd saved for Dad at every family gathering for 18 years. She placed the letter on it. I think we should keep it there, she said, as a reminder, not of him, but of us, of what we chose to become despite him. And that's what we did. The letter stayed on the empty chair, a physical reminder that the past existed but didn't control us, that we'd built something new, something better. Thornton Chen Enterprises continued to grow. Claire Rose joined the company after college, bringing fresh ideas and new energy. TR was showing signs of following in his mother's footsteps, brilliant, compassionate, driven to help people. Thomas and I both eventually stepped back from day-to-day operations, letting the next generation take over. We'd done what we'd set out to do, prove we were more than our father's failures, build something that mattered, create a family based on choice rather than obligation. On what would have been Dad's 80th birthday, we gathered for our Sunday dinner. All of us, 3 generations of a family that shouldn't exist, but does. A family built on broken promises and rebuilt with chosen love. We raised our glasses to the empty chair, not to honor the man who'd sat in it, but to celebrate the space he'd left behind, the space we'd filled with something better, something real. To family, I said. To family, they all echoed. And in that moment, surrounded by people who chose to love each other, I finally understood what success really meant. It wasn't the house I'd bought next to my parents, wasn't the agency I'd built or sold, wasn't even the company we'd grown together. It was this, these people, these Sunday dinners, these chosen relationships, this complicated, messy, beautiful family we'd created from the wreckage of the one we'd been born into. Dad had said I'd built my success on his foundation, that I'd never be sure which parts were really mine. He'd meant it as a curse, a final knife in the back, but he was wrong, because the only foundation that mattered was the one we'd built together, the one made of honesty and vulnerability and showing up even when it was hard, the one that said worth wasn't measured in dollars but in presence, in choosing each other, in doing better than the generation before. That foundation was entirely ours, and it would hold for generations to come. As I looked around the table, at my brother who'd found his strength, at my sister who'd found her family, at mom who'd found her voice, at the children who'd grown up knowing they were loved without condition, I realized something. Dad had been right about one thing, though not the way he'd meant it. I hadn't made it without his money. I'd made it without him, and that made all the difference.